Good morning. I now call the May 21st, 2020 Administrative Briefing and Work Session of the Marion County School Board to order at 9:00 a.m. Please silence your electronic devices to avoid disturbing others. I'll now ask the school board attorney to explain the rules for the board meeting this morning.
This work session is a public meeting as defined in Florida's Sunshine Law. The board is dedicated to full transparency in its meetings and its work. In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the board has adopted uniform meeting procedures, including the right for citizens to participate. The board will allow public comments regarding any of the work session items listed on today's agenda at the appropriate time. Speakers must fill out a request form and hand it to the school board secretary. After the board and superintendent have completed their discussion on a particular agenda item, the secretary will call the speaker's name in the order received. At the podium, speakers are asked to state their full name and address and to spell their last name. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. As required by the Sunshine Law, the board must maintain orderly conduct and proper decorum throughout this meeting. Speakers may criticize subject matter and decisions in a respectful manner, but not people. Finally, speakers must be very careful not to violate the privacy rights of others, especially students and their family members, by mentioning their names or other identifying information. Thank you.
We'll now begin our administrative session with our superintendent's briefing.
Thank you very much. There are some points of discussion and information that I need to present to you today. Ms. Boston Ellis is going to come in first, and we need your assistance regarding field trips, and I'll pass this out while you begin.
Chair Cummings, Vice Chair Thrower, board members, Dr. Mayer, Attorney Green, and Mrs. Martinez-Lopez, good morning. We are continuing to be impacted by the COVID-19 epidemic, especially where it concerns our end-of-year trips for schools and the items that are being passed out to you, concerns that were brought to Dr. Mayer. So thanks to the hard work of our bookkeepers at the schools, and a shout out to all of them as they attempted to get refunds back from different vendors, whether it was Universal for Grad Bash or trips to Busch Gardens. As you can see, a lot of work has been done, and the majority of these checks will be received and remitted to parents and students between this week and next week. We do have a couple of schools that do not have the funds in their internal accounts to reimburse students. They have no idea when they'll get the refund back. So what we are bringing to your consideration today is that the district will reimburse this, or will provide a reimbursement to the schools so that they can reimburse parents and students for these trips, and then when they receive their check, they'll reimburse the district. So there are 2 schools with pretty large issues remaining that we are aware of, and that's Lakeware High. They don't know when they'll get the funds back, $1,970, and that was for a trip, their HOSA and Spanish Club. It was a trip to Busch Gardens, as well as North Marion High. They had written a check for prom to the Hilton Hotel, and again, these were students that had either raised the money or it came out of their pockets or their parents' pockets. So they also don't have a time frame for the refund. And what we would, again, like to do is to provide those funds to the schools so they can reimburse students prior to the end of the school year. And then when they receive the refund, they will remit those dollars back to the district. So this is for your consideration. Again, as I said, the bookkeepers have done a tremendous job hunting down these vendors who have been on short work schedules themselves. So I think they've done a really good job trying to get the funds back into their schools so they can remit to parents and students. But we do have those 2 issues.
Have they been promised the reimbursement from the Hilton and from Busch Garden, or?
I believe the one from the Busch Gardens, yes. Apparently, they sent the check the tickets back to Busch Gardens, but because no one was at the office to receive the tickets, they came back. So they're waiting for the tickets to come back to their school so they can send them to the proper, I guess, the proper department in order to get a refund. Now, on the North Marion High School, we may need some help from Attorney Green to help us get those dollars back.
Yeah, because some of the hotels, they're not. They're having you postpone dates and stuff, but this is a little different scenario. So, I mean, we need to reimburse those parents, but I think this one could be one that needs a little. Yes.
I was going to ask you that afterwards. I think her letter would be more official than the
Is
principal.
this our local Hilton?
Yes.
Okay. I'll be happy to intervene with that too if I need to.
Right. I think they have sent a letter by the principal. Principal has sent a letter, but they have not, gotten any feedback yet.
There's a lot of, they are asking people to postpone and not cancel. Their policies state that. This is a little different situation. That one concerns me. Are we gonna get the total money back?
And I'm in agreement there that we do need to try to get those funds back into those parents' hands. We know that everything's been affected because of the corona, and but I'm too concerned that the Hilton's probably going to want to do some type of percentage or something. They're going to get something out of it, but I think we need to let Suzanne handle that, Ms. Green handle that, and we need to do what's right by the parents.
Do we have a
What is
copy
their-
of their contract from?
Yeah, what's their policy on,
We can certainly
That's
get
why-
one.
It's pretty stiff on cancellation. Yeah, we need to see a copy of that.
But I would hope the goodwill that we have in the
Right.
community
Right.
would
Absolutely.
go.
You absolutely would think that. You would absolutely think that.
But I do understand the business, and
but
we probably need to.
but most of these hotels, if you cancel within a certain amount of time, if we cancel within that timeline,
I don't think we did.
oh, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Well, there's too much uncertainty too.
Yeah. I think we need to see the contract and then have Mrs. Green, but I think we need to go ahead and let us give the funds to the school so they can reimburse, and then we'll
Yeah,
work
immediately.
that.
Let the parents
Yeah.
we'll take care of them, and then we'll deal with the contract issue.
I think that was the objective of Dr. Mayer, because she came to me and I guess the parent came to her, several parents, about refunding these dollars because,
It was
you know.
expensive.
Yes.
Yeah.
And some of these trips are very, very expensive.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't realize that. And the students raised money or, got money from their parents all year long in order to have these trips. So,
And
just
hopefully
one,
the Hilton will work with us. They've been a partner with the school system for decades. Our Project Search site, they've got a very long history of working with and supporting us, so. Yep, I agree.
I think I'm seeing all heads saying yes. Yes, Ms. Boston Ellis.
You stay for the next.
oh, okay.
Then the next point I'd like to bring to your attention, I'll give you that, so you can take a look at that, was brought to my attention by Mr. McFadden. And for your review today, oh, can I have one? Thanks. For your review today, we need your assistance, please, with SRO payments. If you'll look at the handout, Mr. McFadden has tallied timesheets, and there is a discrepancy from what the expectation of hours worked and the payment that they will receive to where they actually worked. For instance, Marion County SROs should have worked 6,512 hours, but actually worked 2,479 hours. OPD, 3,168 should have, but actually did 425. Bellevue should have worked 176, but worked 33. So I understand that, and thank you, Ms. Green, is looking into that, but I need this on your radar, please, so that, however you choose to handle it, but Mr. McFadden has some concerns, and would you like to share any of that? I mean, Ms. Posada did the
Right.
details of the
Well,
hours.
basically, I know one of the contracts, and maybe all of the contracts, talk about if they do not work, we would get reimbursed the next month. I think a lot of the problems happened, again, COVID-19, they were called out on patrol, some of them were ill themselves. So it's, I think under normal circumstances, we would have just adjusted their next payment. But because of these type incidents, we felt like we needed board direction on how to handle this.
Has there been any communication with the sheriff and Grant, and the OPD chief? Has there been any discussion on this and how to resolve it? Or,
I think Attorney Green was,
I didn't speak to the sheriff, to their attorney.
But had
So-
Mr. McFadden reached out to the sheriff or to Chief Grant?
We'll have him come in.
I believe I don't know if it was the
that's
sheriff,
what
but I
I'm
believe
curious.
his
Is there any
counterpart.
communication, or are we just all of a sudden getting attorneys involved and
So let me ask you
gonna
something.
try to be?
I know that there was a point in time that they weren't at around the schools anymore. Was that? But what were they patrolling for?
Patrolling in their area, whatever area they were in, they went back on the street, back to their duties.
So then they weren't working for the school?
No,
And it was by their choice, or?
no, that was the agency's decision. Mr. McFadden can explain that.
So when COVID-19 come up, obviously our schools were closed and law enforcement was pulled for other reasons to take care of some of those issues maybe that was going on patrol. So they weren't in the schools. For the month of March, for instance, we had spring break, had a lot of stuff going on. We just paid everything because it was new to everybody, this year, COVID-19. So for the month of April, I was asked to look into how many hours they were working. I've been working real close with Captain Kelly, who's been, and Brian, Lieutenant Young with OPD, and they've been discussing this with Sheriff Woods and Chief Graham. And me personally, I was like, well, it's above my head, too much for me. So I wanted to bring it to Dr. Mayor's attention, the board's attention, and however you work it out, whatever the adjustments, if there's adjustments, if there's not adjustments, I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware of it, not that I want something done about it, because they have been out working, doing our feeding sites, they've been following our buses, they've been hit also with some of their employees having the COVID-19, so it affected them. So it's affecting everybody. The sheriff, they're going to take care of our summer school programs like they did last year. It's just that the one contract has us paying for 12 months, the other two contracts has us paying for 9 months. So there's really, to adjust everything, requires some other type of outside assistance from, Ms. Green talking to their attorney, our CFO talking to their CFOs, to see if there's room for some adjustments.
Yeah, I would like to see good communication before, like maybe Mr. Cummings could reach out or something, if we could communicate before we start just going straight to attorneys and maybe getting some bad blood and stuff. That's what I'm.
And I agree, because if the community, if they agree that the school system really shouldn't be responsible for patrolling the community. I mean, it looks like maybe this could all be worked out. It'd be like us sending our teachers out to work in the community, instead of doing what they were focused on doing. But maybe there is some adjustment, since the county did use them a little and the city used them a little, that everybody understands that, there might be some COVID dollars or something at the state that can be used for law enforcement for this reason. But I agree with Kelly. I think before we go getting attorneys talking to one another, I think, because I have a feeling Sheriff Woods knows, what in emergency management dollars are available for any kind of emergency like this that could be shifted to some of these expenses, and the OPD, there's probably emergency management dollars up there somewhere that very carefully written could maybe help take care of this, but I think that's something for the heads of those departments to get together
How
with
about-
you.
Well, has
about we-
Dr. Mayer, have you reached out to Sheriff Wood or Chief Graham? Have you had a conversation at all as the captain of our ship?
Right.
Mr. McFadden has done that.
So let's do this.
Well-
Do this. How about, Dennis, you contact them, and we'll go and have a conversation with Sheriff Woods, Chief Graham.
I just didn't
and the
want
other
to go
chief. Yeah.
directly to them because
I got you.
I know,
Right.
I think we handle it the exact correct way. Thank you, Dr. Mayer. It should come to us so that we can, as a board, look at how we want to resolve this and
Yeah.
kind of get our opinion. And I think that we've come to a good consensus that we would like to, gentlemen's work it out.
Yeah.
And then let us know what you come up with.
We definitely need to, we knew that there would be some adjustments because we do know that, some of those SROs did, participate in the feeding program as well. And then they, once
Are
that
those
was over,
hours
they went back.
included in
Yeah, that
this?
was my question.
Are those hours included in these
Yes.
numbers?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
So the feeding, the following our buses,
That's in
those
there.
hours are included?
that's in there. And then once they finished those dues, they went back to their patrol. So we, Dennis, I think you did, Mr. McFadden, you did a good job putting it together. We just need to present it to the sheriff and the chiefs and see how we need to make the adjustment based on our contracts.
And I'll reach out to them today.
Okay. And just, set up and Suzanne and I go over, Dr. Mayor and
Thank you.
Teresa. Thank you. Thanks.
Last point, on Tuesday's agenda, we have the Oakcrest and Evergreen contracts. And Dr. Grantham, could you pass that to Kevin to head? And so we wanted to give you an update on the status of that, and Dr. Grantham will start that discussion.
Need one more. You got it. You gonna talk?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Ms. Thrower and I and Heinert and the two principals, both from Oakcrest and Evergreen, have met with Dr. Ellers and met with Ms. Elsperman, 3 times? And we've met more than that, so we kind of feel like we're in a pretty good place with our contract. I will tell you that Ms. Elsperman did cut her contract for each school roughly by $35,000 for both schools. Times 2 is $70,000. She is aware we're in financial dire straits right now, so she was very accommodating with that. But there are still things she has to do required by statute. We've walked through it line by line, month by month. What are you going to provide? What does it look like? So the contract, I believe, Ms. Green, has come to you. We're close to that. Have you seen it?
We send it back to staff.
Yeah, so we're in a pretty good place with that, but Ms. Thor's kind of led that charge, and I feel like we're in a pretty good place when it comes to Oakcrest and Evergreen with the contract with our external operator.
We're also great foundational conversations between all of us, about the expectations for next year. Every externally operated school has its own dynamic. And very fortunately, we're not looking at having to replace any principals or anything like that. We're looking to build on a foundation that was laid this past year. And only due to COVID were we not able to not be having this conversation based on our data. So it was really, really good to have those conversations so that everyone is on the same page about the expectations for next year, especially, the two schools and their partnership with Ms. Elsperman. So I would say that when it all played out, everyone is excited and enthusiastic while still being disappointed about being in this position, but we've put that behind us and we're moving forward. She gave us a 20% discount. It was a good negotiation. I think everybody feels good about the outcome.
Overcoming something that you asked for last year, there will be forthcoming a very specific, what are you doing in August, what are you doing in September? Remember last year you kept saying, show me what you're doing, so we've really,
Working documents, yeah.
we've worked that up so that would be very specific as to what the EO does.
And we do still get the dollars for the bottoms, for the operator. We get the dollars from the state pretty much. Does it, Dr. Mayor, doesn't it fund most of the turnaround dollars? Don't pretty much fund?
This comes out of the general fund. We pay for this out of the
But
general.
would they give us so much per student and all?
TSSA,
By the time it all adds up and everything,
but it doesn't wash like that. it's coming for, or it's per student, if I'm not right, I think per student, we get some money.
And relatively speaking, she's very, very affordable, almost cheap as what she's charging. Some districts are paying
Oh, yes.
$400,000, $500,000, $700,000 per school, and we're in the twos with her.
And
So we're getting some,
from my understanding with folk in Tallahassee in the commissioner's office, her contract was one of the best contracts in the state for us to deal with, so.
You know, Jane Elsperman, if anybody, for the situation, even if the schools made Cs, and I'm convinced that, you know, we probably would have been out from under that. But and sometimes there's always, I'm the silver lining girl, everybody knows that. But to have Jane Elsperman there for another year, to get the foundation really solid over there, I think it's good for the schools.
I'll tell you too, she was there 100 days last year. That's a lot of Jane out of school. 100 days is a lot. Other states want her to come more than that. So we're getting some good service. And because she's part of this community.
Well, and she's just Jane. And I think that the way things worked out, it's going to be good for the schools at the end of the day.
This has been looked at hours, and Ms. Thrower has done a lot of homework too to get to this point too.
Well, and the two-tier management system is always challenging for highly capable principals and highly effective teachers. You know, it's another layer of management. However, that being said, you do have a point, Ms. Stacy, in the sense that we're not even sure yet what next year is going to look like. So to have the extra support, to have the extra funds, to have the foundational understanding now much more clear about the roles and the gradual releasing of responsibilities so that these schools will heartily fly on their own in perpetuity is the game plan. So I'm satisfied. It's always nice when you have a negotiation and everybody walks away feeling like they don't have a bitter taste in their mouth.
And thank you, Ms. Thrower, for your involvement. This is such a proactive board. It's probably in all the years that I've watched. I leave so happy in November knowing these guys will be left behind
Left behind.
as I go to the beach.
Rhapsody,
Thank you.
rapture.
Thank you, Doctor.
I raptured
So,
out of
you
here.
guys know this is on Tuesday's agenda,
On the consent?
on the consent agenda.
If y'all have questions, you can reach out to either of us, for sure.
You're next.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Mayor.
That concludes the briefing.
Thank you. Dr. Mayor, summer plans.
Grant? You're ready.
Good morning, everyone. We met Monday. There's been a lot of uncertainty from our community about what the summer looks like, so we had a Zoom call Monday, and we said we want everybody to present what's happening in each of your departments so we can kind of tell the board, so if you're getting questions from parents and things that are going on. The funny part is Ms. Beck could not do just one slide. You know, she cannot stick to the parameters of one slide for elementary ed. So there's some minutia in this, but I'm going to go through this and kind of tell you. But I think the biggest one today is going to be Jody Phillips and what he has to talk about with what's going on with athletics. But I do want to applaud Jody before we ever start. Jody said, I am not in a place to put athletics over academics ever. So if we're doing something for academics, we're going to do the same thing for high school, for athletics. So I do want to start with that. So if you don't know Jody, he has a great character, and when he comes in to speak about this. So what I'm going to do is I'm literally going to grab a slide, grab someone to come in, unless it's very simple to see, okay? So the first one's our VPK, and I'll ask Dr. Ellers, and it takes about 15 seconds to get there, so let me grab her.
There's a delay there.
Not asking us to get there so bad. That is the stress, you know.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Last time I was here, I told you that I really didn't have much information from the Office of Early Learning. I still don't. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to take care of our kids, and we're going to take care of our community. So we're going to move forward with the hybrid model, and we're going to have the backpacks that I discussed with you ready to go when Miss Beck's backpacks are ready to go. We've enlisted the help of Student Services for families who can't come to the school to pick up their VPK backpacks. Our enrollment has opened, our lottery has opened. Right now, we have 100 children already on deck for fall, and we've been open 48 hours. And the phones are ringing like crazy because I've been getting texts in the lobby, with updated numbers. So we have 100 correctly filled out applications ready to go for fall. We're still waiting on some summer numbers. But in July, we are going to open up Building 24, which is on the MTI campus. And we are going to follow the social distancing recommendations, and we will keep absolutely current with that and whatever this board decides is appropriate for summer. And I have already 2 staff members that are on contract that will be able to provide those educational services, so I can limit the impact financially to the district if we don't get reimbursed for those VPK hours. So best of both worlds, we already have people that are supposed to be at work anyway, who can take care of our children, who can provide those VPK services, and I don't have to add to the staffing plan for summer if in fact the Office of Early Learning chooses not to acknowledge our program as we've rolled it out. We did have a conference call with the local Early Learning Coalition this week. We presented our plan in the question and answer section, and basically what we got oh, well, thank you, that's interesting. So I'm not really sure anybody's willing to commit right now to what they're doing in July, but it is my firm belief that based on the dynamics of our community and based on the comprehensive plan that Ms. Beck has put together for our elementary students, their younger siblings certainly can have access as well to engaging activities and some help for parents. So that's where I stand with VPK, and should you have any questions whatsoever, I'm always available to answer them.
How many do we plan on enrolling, and how many will be at MTI?
So we are looking at about 20 seats to stay safe for social distancing. I have 2 staff members plus a coach on deck, so that because again, trying to social distance 4-year-olds and making sure that we're cleaning materials and we're providing appropriate supervision, and that we're also not setting up a dynamic where we're being developmentally inappropriate. Kids need to learn how to share. Kids need to learn how to walk on a line. Kids need to learn how to stay safe in a classroom. So I certainly don't want to start training kids, in a way, it's a terrible way to say it, but training kids to go backwards, in the way they're socially interacting. But at the same time, I also know that we have professionals on deck ready to work to expose our children to those foundational skills that they need to be ready for kindergarten.
So you said 20 kids are going to be over here?
Yes, sir. We have 4 classrooms that we can open up because we do have the high school program for vocational ed. We also have a classroom for YPP that's not being used for summer. So I have classrooms, I have materials, I have everything that the children would need to access.
And then how many for the fall?
Well, we have all of our seats open for the fall,
which is
so
how
it's
many?
about 43 classrooms. We cap at 20, but we do reserve some seats for ESE students so that we can follow an inclusion LRE model for our children. So we are continuing with enrollment as
You
as
said
if we're
of
gonna.
Right now, you have 100 already.
We have 100 already, yes, sir.
I think it's more dangerous for these children mentally and emotionally to make them stay apart from each other, socially distance. Honestly, that is worse. If they're gonna be in a room and there's 10 of them in a room or whatever the numbers are, it doesn't matter if they're 6 feet apart because they're gonna pass each other's space. I think that at some point we have to stop just this whole COVID thing. Everybody just wants to look good with all the social distancing, but yet in Walmart they're passing each other. It's all so insane. I have a grandson she just put him back in his preschool. It never closed. He was so disturbed by seeing, like, oh, now we got to stand here on this line. We can't get here. It had him so upset. He was becoming so aggressive. He was becoming angry and aggressive, and because he didn't understand why he couldn't stand certain places because this new rule, I hope that we use common sense. If there's 10 children in the classroom, let them be in a classroom. They're going to be totally exposed. But to put desks 6 feet apart and tell the kids you got to stay 6 feet, they don't even know what 1 foot is, much less 6 feet. I would rather not.
I agree with you, and to be honest with you, Ms. Stacy, common sense is always going to be front and center, so is
You've got
developmentally
to.
appropriate practice.
Because-
And we will make every effort to ensure that our kids are emotionally protected from this situation, because to be very honest with you, I would rather step down from my position than put children in a situation where we're going to do more
Just
harm than
because-
good.
Just because the DOE says we gotta leave, they gotta.
You're exactly
gotta stand
right.
still. I mean, there comes a point where we're gonna stand with you. We want what's best for these kids. And if there's 10 of them in a room and they're playing, if they're in the room for half a day together, however long it is, and they're playing.
Well, it's 10 hours.
COVID doesn't know to stay over here 6 feet or whatever, you know? They don't know how, COVID doesn't know how far to
They
stay
don't.
back.
But we also can play games and incorporate some fun sort of challenges and some activities and parallel play. There's a lot of things that if we make sure that we remain in our skill set and we put the right people in front of the kids, well, our kids will be protected. If we don't hire for the sake of hiring and do for the sake of compliance, we can get this right and we can make our kids comfortable. But what I need, Mrs. Stacy, is I need kids in front of us, because I'm watching even parents that I know have some pretty good skill set and some pretty good support systems. You yourself said at our last meeting that you guys had to pass your 3-year-old grandson around at the beach because he was just really getting ornery about it. And so you have a great support system, you have a skilled family,
You just
and
put him
you
back
guys are losing it. So I have to make sure that we have our kids in front of us.
Put him back in preschool, they sit at the table all together, they paint and they do everything. It's just a normal life for him now. And he's got his attitude back, the right attitude.
But we will be responsible, because at the same time, I don't want to open up the district for liability and anything else like
They
that.
can only
So
get
we'll
so
be
much
careful.
money.
Yes.
I'm going to work with our attorneys, I'm going to work with the Board of Health, and I'm going to make sure that we follow.
I have a question. Ms. King
Yes, sir.
just said something that I was thinking. What are other districts doing in relation to
Right
this?
now, we have no real commitment. Very small counties such as Clay are going to open up in July as well, but they don't have the number of children that we have. So they have about 5 kids, I think, 5 or 6 kids that they have committed to coming back in July. Again, this is another reason why I want to use.
We're going to be the pilot.
Well, no, because I don't ever want our children to be guinea pigs. What I want is to make sure that I don't hire extra and have people that are already on contract, so that this way, if we have to bag it and just continue online and continue engaging children online because it's safer for them, I don't have to promise a teacher a job and then say, sorry, we were just kidding. So I
At what point will you
really,
know whether or not we have to go forward or we need to stop? At what point will you know that?
following the governor's lead, it feels like every 2 weeks they're really looking at the data and they're looking at spikes in.
And I'm hearing,
July. And I
Okay.
think that's going to be a theme that you see with everybody,
Okay.
is the July 6th
Right.
date is when we anticipate real life.
because I keep hearing stuff coming from different areas, but I'm not hearing any real direction. I'm hearing generalities, and it puts it back on the district as far as the liability, because we could assume some heavy liability.
Absolutely, and also just having to live with the fact that you put somebody else's
Right.
child at risk. So to me, that's why I want only my existing staff that's already on
Okay.
contract, and why even for the online component, I have one staff member that is on contract only starting in July, so I'm going to take on a caseload myself, so that this way we're not bringing on extra staff that we don't need, and we know that we can fill seats with people who already are going to be getting paid.
What type of safety protocols are we having? Are we taking temperatures? Are we doing anything like that with these kids? I think those may be some things that we need to seriously consider.
Right, and those are protocols that we will have in place. I would imagine when we have that mid-June updates, that we would do that, for sure.
Here's my concern, though, with temperatures.
Face-to-face is tentative July, and that'll be the theme that you see with
And Mary-
everybody coming through.
And Marion County's numbers, Mark Lander sits on my Children's Alliance board, and we had a meeting last week. They are nowhere near where they projected us to be. We're still really, really flat.
Right.
And so he thinks we're in a good place. And we had a lot of conversation, and Dennis Baxley sits on my board as well, about getting kids back in classrooms.
I did speak with a DCF worker the other day, and they're getting many, many more calls than they're used to, and it's because
Oh, yeah.
families are getting tired. Kids are really, my own two children at home. They're 16 years old. They're high school kids. They've had enough of online. It's the first time my youngest of my twins said, I just can't wait to go back to school. I would drag him out the door to try to, so
And I
he wants
get-
to go back. So.
I get that. I get that the numbers have been flat, but what I kind of pay attention to is that this thing just keeps evolving, and it evolved with a new strand for kids. Kawasaki, yeah, and I just want us to be as safe as we can. I agree, these kids need to be getting instruction. We know they already going to have a spring break slide. Now they're having a COVID slide, and they're going to have a summer slide. We need to try to get them the instruction, but we need to make sure that we're doing it as safe as
Well, Mr.
possible.
Cummins, I remember well when chickenpox, there was a strange thing with the chickenpox. It would cause kids to go into these comas. I don't know if y'all, people my age will remember. It had a name, and because we lost a little girl in our community when I was growing up with it. But it's got to do with the chickenpox virus, and the children would go into a coma and they would die. I mean, they just died. So there are side effects, but we can't rule the nation by what happens to 50 kids or 100 kids.
Well, unless it's your kid. So we do have, I mean,
No,
really,
the flu, they have now stated that more children die from the common flu under a certain age than this. So we got to start, I'm glad July's coming because I'm about over this.
Well, and also just to speak to what Reverend Cummings just said, a lot of the children that pass away from complications from the flu actually do get Kawasaki syndrome, because Kawasaki syndrome is due to a viral assault on the immune system.
A lot of inflammation.
And so Kawasaki syndrome is something that in
So we've
my
always had it
past-
from the flu too then.
Yeah, well, yeah, but understand something, and this is very important for everybody to hear, and just as a teacher, I sat in a pediatric intensive care unit with a parent whose child did get Kawasaki syndrome when I was 23 years old, brand new teacher, and I just sat there, and the pain, the induced coma that child had to go in because of the pain was something that you don't recover from seeing, and you don't recover from watching a mother have to sit there and make that decision. So honestly, yes, I understand 50 or 20, but that, or whatever, that's,
But
we don't
can't
need
keep
that.
kids from getting the flu either. If they get it from the flu, we've got to get back to normal. That's my
Okay,
last
if
comment.
I have one thing though, if there is going to be the check-in, the temperature thing, I've been in the classroom enough to know sometimes parents will feed their children
Tylenol
Tylenol, and here you go to class with the symptoms or whatever. So there also needs to be policy like zero, Tylenol for 24, I don't know, ask the health department what it should be.
Enforce that though.
Well, and I think that we need to also, if we aren't getting reimbursed by the Office of Early Learning, I've lived in a classroom long enough to know what the Tylenol Motrin combo looks like. You can't medicate away sick eyes, and I have no problem. I will be on campus. I have no problem saying he doesn't look right. You need to go home.
Thank you.
And so I'm not, as long as I don't get in trouble by the board or the superintendent, I'm fine I will drive them home. I don't care.
I'll back you up all the way on that, because I'd rather that one sick kid go home than to be in school.
I will be on campus when this occurs, and I'll take responsibility for making sure if somebody needs to go home, they're going home.
Thank you.
Dr. Ellers, I just want to thank you for taking steps, because a couple of weeks ago, it was painful to have you have to say that there was nothing happening.
No
And that
direction.
we were waiting for direction. And there comes a time when we have to look at our county. And those of you that follow the news, just very, very recently, and this is a common thing, 100 babies a year are born drug addicted. 5 kids were found with hypodermic needles all over the place.
Really?
Yes, passed out, whoever they were, adults. And so the cost of doing nothing, this is what keeps me up at night. We're talking more than 5 kindergarten classes a year with 100 kids born drug addicted that are likely going to need a lot more extra support.
Yes, ma'am.
So if we don't get in there and start helping and do the simple things well and consistently,
Right.
it just getting kids and adults to wash their hands consistently, to practice those basic precautions with fidelity will go a long way towards alleviating pretty much all of our risk.
And our overdose numbers are up.
course they
Graham
are.
reported that. There
Alcohol
were
sales are
children
up.
involved, so we got to get them back in a safe
Yes.
place.
Or at least get them talking to us, because even if I can't bring them back in July for some reason, keeping them online, keeping them engaged, keeping families, with at least an outlet, I just want to be able to have an option for them, even if their child's not on the Zoom and that mom wants to say, I'm going to call you because I'm going to just lose my mind in a minute. I want to be able to say, okay, what's going on, and get some help to them. And we can't if we have nothing to offer.
And help and support is even more critical now than it's ever been for our youngest population, because think about it, what are we paying Oakcrest and Evergreen?
Yeah.
We're either going to support from the earliest age possible, knowing that that's the only way to go, or it's going to come back to haunt us in multiple ways over and over and over again throughout our whole community. And so I applaud you for taking the bull by the horns. Please keep us posted about what this board member can do anyway, and maybe I'm preaching with the choir. Yes.
Good, because I have some ideas, so good.
Absolutely, to ensure that the safety, to ensure that our kids' needs are getting met, and that we are meeting this challenge head-on from the earliest age possible.
Okay, well, we
Thank you.
got you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are we good?
Good.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, before we go to the next slide, I do want you to see that July 6th date, and that says tentative. So you'll see that date popping up on almost everything. Last day of instruction is June 1. Gives us a cleansing, a restart. Let's get summer school taken care of. Let's get the requirement things done. But you see July 6th as tentative. So, Reverend Cummings, I hope we start moving forward and we continue to progress like we have. And then July, maybe there's some sense of normalcy. So you'll see that date as we move through here. But you don't see June 1st as the day we're going to start kicking either. You see July 6th.
Where are you pointing to July 6th?
See the tentative under the face-to-face instruction?
Right.
That bullet. You'll see that date every single time. So
If you have 10 kids in a room and they're running around, whatever the first kid's got, all nine's probably going to have unless he's got a super
Right.
immune system. It's just the way it is. The virus doesn't know to stay 6 feet apart.
right, so Miss Beck's coming in, and she's going to just go through elementary ed.
Can't run from an invisible thing.
Hey, Ms. Beck.
Good morning, Reverend Chair,
Give
Vice
us-
Chair.
I'm gonna request something.
Okay,
Can we give us the thorough, short version?
absolutely. Miss Dr. Grantham already requested that before I came in. And you know what? I have already presented to you all both of our summer camps. So really what I am here to do is just to reiterate the dates. Ours will begin on June 15th and will run through Thursday, July 9th. Wanted to give you an update for third grade camp. It's called Camp Extreme. It is by invitation only, and we already have 253 students as of this morning whose parents have signed up for this virtual camp. We are super excited about that. The other thing I wanted to update you on is that after I came to you before, I got a couple of community calls wanting to know how they could help. And so I have been sending the flyer out. I've got a couple of folks who are going to put it on their church community bulletin boards or in their community centers. So I think the message here today is certainly if anyone is watching or listening and they want to help get the word out about our enrichment camp that is open to all kindergarten through fifth grade students, please help us to do that. I'm happy to send the flyer to them, and we would love their assistance. This is kind of a community-wide effort. And that's all I have to say.
So no face-to-face instruction for elementary school this summer?
Virtual or nothing right now.
Okay.
And the enrichment camp is not invitation only. That's open to
Open
any
to
K to
everyone.
5. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Ms. That was very good.
I do have one.
Like that?
I do have one quick question, because I focused on right now, it's all virtual. So as the governor every 2 weeks shares information, because this is something that is really difficult for parents and community members, they are just trying to get some type of timeline, and maybe Kevin can help us with this too. On the press releases, I'm noticing it says subject to change, and I don't know if we could be a little bit more specific in that a statement, maybe the governor is every 2 weeks giving updates, and that would be the time when we might be able to adjust and become more phase two in our planning as well, which leads me to my original thought, which was, do you have a plan B for more of a hybrid option if things open up more for us?
So that's a great question. So for this camp, no, we are, both of these camps, we're expecting to keep them virtual. We are hiring, and Ms. Boston will come in a minute and talk to you about some folks we're hiring, and they're being hired for virtual purposes, and we've been.
That's great,
Yep.
because that's hybrid.
Yep. I do know that as the summer continues, we certainly will need and will want to have discussions about maybe what the end of the summer looks like. But again, I think we're committing to right now, given the information that we have, and we're excited. So, I mean, I could just go on and
So
on.
I would love if, towards the end of the summer, if we can ease up to look at those really low, especially in third grade, can we bring them in and do some face-to-face? Even our low second graders, do some face-to-face with them. So let's not take that off the table, and maybe through the reading camps, the virtual reading camps will be able to help determine who some of those children would be. But I really think that it would be important, because, you know, the achievement gap is going to be huge. I don't care what anybody says, it's going to be huge. That equity issue that I keep talking about is huge. And so that achievement gap is going to be very large, regardless of what we do, unless we can have that face-to-face contact. So I hope that we will look at with our really low second and third graders, if we have the opportunity to get in front of them before school starts again.
And that is definitely something that's in the back of our mind as well. I think we're waiting for continued guidance from the governor as far as what kind of happens locally in our community. But we agree with you that when we can get our children, even on a select basis, in front of us, face-to-face, we can do great things with them.
And this will be one time too, that, you know, the board likes to know what's going on, but this will be one time if a parent calls and says, Miss Stacy, they're doing this, I'm gonna go, great, tell me about it, you know? So y'all move, y'all do what you need to do, and if I find out from whatever that we're doing something and, you know, I'm fine, then, you know, that's great, because I want y'all to move on a dime.
Okay? Thank
Move on
you.
a dime. How do y'all feel about that?
It's
Move on
very
a dime.
reassuring to the community to know that as situations change, that we are positioning ourselves to be nimble and to meet kids' needs as the opportunities continue to unfold. You know, that we're going to be there for them, and that's going to be the most reassuring of all to the community. It is agonizing to wait and be uncertain. However, our governor's been pretty consistent every 2 weeks. I believe that's what he said from the beginning. They were going to analyze the data, and then we did our soft opening for, you know, for phase one, and then second part of phase one, and then hopefully we'll be moving into phase two. That is something that the community needs to stay abreast of, is what the governor's putting out there. And I think we're all ready to safely continue to do as much as we can.
I agree.
Thank you, Ms. Mack.
All right, thank you so much.
So if you look at that July 9th is the Thursday, and we talked about starting things July 6th, so that would be the Monday starting things, and July 9th would be that Thursday. So summer school academics would be over that Thursday, and I'm kind of setting Jody up with when he's talking about for athletics. But I do want to show you something. This is elementary, and this is secondary. Noticeable difference. I'm talking about just in the conciseness between Mr. McAteer and Ms. Beck. So that's just a little joke for Ms. Beck to go back and see.
That's a man and a woman.
And Mr. McAteer said, I don't need you to come for that. I said, I can handle that. So he's doing summer school, but you see his goes to July 23rd because they're doing credit recovery, and those that takes longer. So you'll see that there.
A bullet point.
Right. 8-1, single, right. And he struggled with getting that much. So I'm going to ask Cassandra to come in and talk to you about how we're paying for everything so you can see that. And she is very, very quick.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so the overall mission of Title I is to support our disadvantaged students. And as Ms. Beck just spoke about the summer enrichment camp, that's what we're going to do. We're going to help support those students. And with that, Title I is going to fund 2 instructors for each elementary school to help oversee that summer enrichment program. We're also providing funds for those grab-and-go student materials packages that, parents will be able to come by the school and pick up. Title IV funds will support N.H. Jones and Madison Street with those 2 instructors as well as, those materials for those grab-and-go packets. And it says seeking, and that's simply because there's an amendment at the state in order that we need approval to support those 2 schools. Please know that I've seen several webinars and spoken to DOE, and they are addressing those amendments with a sense of urgency, so we don't have any fear that those funds will not be available to Madison and N.H. Jones. The other piece from from Title I is the migrant program, and we are, through our Title I Part C funds, 1 teacher to support a virtual summer program for elementary migrant students, and that will address kids in K2 through 8, and then we have 2 homeschool liaisons that will support parent engagement as well as high school students with the credit recovery options. So that's what we're doing from Title I.
Thank you, Ms. Boston.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Ms. McCall, let me brag on Ms. Boston. You talked about having kids come back. We have been working on a plan for those first couple of weeks before school using Title I funds, not just bring in 2nd and 3rd graders, but to bring in everybody to get rid of that summer slide.
Okay,
So that is a conversation.
thank you.
Okay, here comes Jody, and you'll see this. So Ms. Slaughter's calling me after lunch about this, so I told her we were having discussion on it. She's been emailing me, so we'll talk about that. And again, I want to point you to that tentative July 6th date. Jody?
Sir, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And thank you for allowing me to be here. I think just to start, today I want you to know it's a very brief version because there's a lot going on. We are working, I will tentatively start to tell you, we are working on secondary and more detailed plans with a couple of different groups, but we did want to, as you've mentioned earlier, just get some dates out there for folks and yourselves to understand. What 4-quarter process, I have to give credit to Mr. McAteer. That was his idea. He thought it was apropos. So
Yeah.
4 quarters of returned activities. And I do also want you to understand that in the thought process of all this, it is based on all of our activities, not just any one specific activity. We're trying to put together something that is going to work for everything, including band and cheerleading and football and basketball, the whole, everything that goes on our campuses from that perspective. So in a nutshell, I do feel, Dr. Grantham mentioned earlier, I've struggled for weeks about how to return and what's best and what we would allow. And the conclusion for me is that we're an educational institution. We're here to educate students. We are not here to provide them with athletics first and foremost. So therefore, I do strongly feel that we need to keep that in our mind as we return to these activities.
Except athletics is the best dropout prevention program we have.
Ms. Stacy, I've been fighting for athletics, and I'm passionate about it, and I know,
It's the best dropout
I
prevention
totally
program
do agree.
education has.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And I would stand in front of you if you thought about getting rid of it and fight for it all day, every day. I know it does so many good things for these kids.
Kids that have to.
Yeah, and it broke my heart that we couldn't finish.
That's okay.
It broke my
I just
heart.
want
but-
you to know that
Yes, ma'am.
it does have a huge link to academics.
Yes, oh, certainly, and I agree. And so, right now, and moving forward until, and at this point, until July date, we will continue to interact with students from a virtual perspective, which is similar to what we're providing them in an academic setting. I think we need to mirror that, and then as we begin to open up our campuses and allow students to return in an academic setting face-to-face, we would allow students for activities to return in a face-to-face notion as well. Now, that first quarter, or excuse me, the second quarter, but the step past the virtual, I do feel it best that we keep the groups small for what would ultimately be a week or 2 weeks. Tentatively, it's 2 weeks today. We may look at it and say, after a week of that, we're confident, the students understand what to do, the instructors, the coaches understand. We've got a feel for how to operate this instead of putting 100 band members, 100 football players, or whatever in front of a coach on July 6th and saying, okay, here's all the rules, here's 3 pages worth of rules that we've developed for you, figure this out. I want us to have a little pattern and us to put our eyes on what's happening before we move to that. So in the third quarter, we would move then, still keeping with the idea of a manageable group inside and indoors, but certainly expanding our outdoor opportunities greatly, and as long as CDC and health and there's nothing stopping us, or you guys don't have a different opinion, we would go to 50 outside at that point. And then ultimately that fourth quarter, which as of today is the 27th, the FHSAA, and they haven't moved off of the 27th date for fall start. So to us, the fourth quarter would mean basically we're returning to activity. And we're going to line up and cross country. I mean, we're going to go full practice, and we're going to have a way to manage that and determine what is best, and we'll certainly bring that back. And we are well on our way in the development part of what we feel like it will look like. And we got some good direction this week from the National Federation. The National Strength Coaches Association Alliance put out some things this week as well that I think are very strong, and we have been building something, and I've been working with probably close to 35 to 37 other counterparts across Florida. And I will tell you, just to end, that this date that we are using is pretty common out there at this point, because a lot of the folks feel very similar to the sentiments that I have, in the sense that until we get face-to-face with the academic side of things on our campuses, it's very difficult to put anything else in front of that.
So, Joe, Mr. Phillips,
Yes, sir.
these dates, this July 6th date, that a flexible date, could it possibly, could that move up early? Could it be any earlier if we get some clearance somewhere?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
My question,
We're very flexible, and I'll be very frank with you. I certainly, we'd all love it to be today,
Right.
not only for the kids, but for the coaches and the sponsors and such as well. They're itching, and we know that as our parents.
so my question, when it says the maximum of 10 individuals inside or outside, so does that mean that several groups of 10 can be on campus at the same time, working with different coaches or volunteers from the communities? I'm thinking not only athletics, but I'm thinking band. I'm thinking that, you could have your woodwinds, a group of woodwinds with 10, your brass with 10, your percussion, and have them on campus
Yes,
at the
ma'am.
same time, just in those small groups. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking those 10.
I think what we really are talking is that we have an employee, and I understand that volunteers normally get involved. My recommendation would be employee in this case,
Okay.
supervising the students at this point. I know that we will move into
Okay.
that
Okay.
arena,
I'm
but
just-
yes, I could definitely envision that there would be 10 softball players out doing something and 10 band members or 30 band members, but supervised by, in groups or pods of 10, in different
Okay.
areas. Yes, ma'am.
And outside, they say this virus just drops like that when the sun's on it.
Right.
So-
Yes, ma'am.
And the reason I
And we're
asked,
still confused too, because we're talking groups of 10, but restaurants can open at 50% capacity, so we.
It's also
fluid.
confusing.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. It, very much so.
But this is a very workable plan. I think having groups of 10 kids to work on skills is a fabulous idea, rather than bringing them all together anyway.
are you flexible
Called
enough?
sectionals.
Are you flexible enough, Jody, to move, depending on what happens, to move that second quarter up to start possibly at the same time, June 15th, as summer school starts?
I'm,
If
are
we
we, the plan is going to be flexible enough.
Okay.
I'm flexible enough, and it will.
And I'm,
At the
reason I'm saying,
direction.
I'm just trying to coordinate them, looking at, if things open up that much, and I want everybody to know, I'm about safety first. I am.
Right.
I'm looking at kids getting sick. I don't want kids to get sick. But if summer school, I'm looking at the summer school start date of July 15th, possibly with coordinating or lining up with quarter two of yours. That's what I'm thinking. If you have that flexibility, of course, but I'm with you right now where you at.
We can carry it out. Don't have a hesitation with that.
Yeah, and
Yes,
safety is important, but if the kids are on a positive track with their athletics and everything, it might keep them out of a car wreck too. So, off the streets as much as possible and in with some type of organized, supervised activity, because safety is not just the flu. It's kids that are committing suicide, it's kids that are doing drugs and all of that. So, the flu is not the only danger out there. There's a lot of boogeymen.
Mr. Phillips, I think you did an excellent job on this. This is well thought out, it's planful, you've done your research, you're collaborating with your peers and outside, so we're all on the same page during this confusing time, and you stood out, sir, as being on the ball. And as a board member, I appreciate you and everything you have done to prepare our students for a safe opening that makes complete sense to this board member. So thank you, sir.
thank you.
And I ditto, Mrs. King.
Well, I did,
Being flexible, I love. Being able to.
I did though,
do what's
because
best for kids.
that's my teammate, and he graduated in one of the greatest classes that ever graduated. Forest High School, 1987. So I expect nothing less.
Thank
He
you.
turned red. Y'all saw him.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
If we get the date moved up or something by the government, we'll just take quarter two and put it on whatever that date would be, and we'll
Thank
move forward and then adjust the quarter.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go through this one quickly. Instructional materials, this is what's going on with them right now. Just want to provide that information. The dual enrollment piece, there are 127 students enrolled at CF. Not going to spend a lot of time on that slide. You can read that. That just came from Ms. Leeds. And you see the bottom, their contact. If you have a specific question, those
Right.
particular people can answer. Okay, this is Mark. Mr. Vianella.
Gentlemen, I have
Morning.
2 slides. I will be brief on both. The first is a secondary slide. The second is our post-secondary slide. So we're focusing on, in CTE, our students earning their industry certifications. And we've been focusing on that for the past 3 weeks. We work with each vendor so that our students can be taking on at-home tests when the vendor allows that. Starting this past Monday, we are now having our students come onto campus, and of course, we're working within small groups, but we're focusing on seniors, 8th graders, of course, and those students that are program completers, so they won't be in a CTE course next school year, and they're the ones that are coming onto campus. We think that we're going to get most of the students. You'll see on the slide, that may be a high number, but we're approximating no more than 150 will come in throughout the month of June to finish up their industry certification testing. And then we've got about 400 of our students will be participating in virtual conferences for FBLA or HOSA or FFA. They will be learning from the comfort of their home. They won't be actually going anyplace, but they'll still be connected to their organizations and doing that through Zoom or Skype at home. And then this will be the 3rd year that we continue our summer externships. And this is for teachers, but we think this is very important. These are our teachers are going into industry, and they're actually keeping update on the technology and on the skills. So when they come back and we teach in the fall, it's relevant, it's up-to-date material, so we didn't want to end that, and we've got approximately 30 teachers that will be doing that. On the post-secondary side, this is, of course, Marion Technical College. We are having small groups of students coming onto campus. They're all wearing masks, and of course, they're getting ready for their national boards. So they are learning in small groups. They check in through the front office. MTC will have their graduation on June 11th. They're going to do it on their campus in the front lawn right outside their school. They'll run all day. They'll do it by program. They'll have 6 different very brief ceremonies, no more than 20 students, socially distanced, of course, and then no more than 80 in the audience, and they'll be spaced out. So there'll be 4 tickets per individual. And they've got certification testing taking place on their campus as well. Their faculty will come back. You've heard the July 6th. They will come back on July 6th, and then on July 10th is when they're going to tentatively start staggering the CDL program, some of the health programs. GED won't start until August, but there'll be students coming in starting next year's program on July 10th.
Great.
And
On the
that,
graduations, will we get invitations? Will school board members be able to attend, maybe one or
absolutely.
per program or something?
Absolutely.
Because it would be wonderful to celebrate
Yes.
those students as well.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Villanova.
Thank you.
This next slide is just for you to read. It's everything that's going on at the school, so the area directors put this together. So it just shows you the conferences, it shows you the camps, it shows you who to contact for everything that's happening on site. This is teaching and learning from Ms. Shafty, what's going on there. There's 2 things that we have going. So she has a ton of PD ready to go June 2nd and June 3rd for teachers all the way through June 8th. So you'll see some of the things she has. But then we have that mental health training that's provided by Ms. Steckman that she came to speak to you about. We have 560 slots available that begin on June 3rd through June 8th. There's a morning session and an afternoon session for teachers. We're still trying to get all those done. It's a 4-hour course. So top is PD, just regular PD. The bottom is mental health PD. That's provided by Mr. McGowan and Ms. Steckman.
Thank you for putting the funding sources too. It's interesting to see where the money's coming from and where the flow.
Who do you think suggested that one, Ms. Rower? Miss Boston Ellis. Yeah, she wanted you to see it. ESE, this is what's going on with ESE, and I know that she, Dr. Albies always says ESY, so we identify what ESY is, extended school year. There's the schools that it impacts for ESE. There's what's going on, the teachers' work schedule, teacher expectations for ESE for the summer.
This is going to be all virtual or packets?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And employment services, Ms. Dobbs will come speak to you.
Actually, I see small groups of students
I think that's Hillcrest.
targeting individual goals. Good.
Yeah, Hillcrest is different.
There's some kids that you just, yeah.
Good morning, everyone. With an update to our hiring procedures, following the governor's Phase 1 reopening, our fingerprinting, as you know, was held. We couldn't fingerprint for a while, but since we've reopened, fingerprinting has resumed, and so we continue our new hire processes with social distancing procedures in place. Our instructional units, we did our voluntary transfer window at the end of April. All instructional units are currently posted externally, and we continue to hire those teaching positions. Our non-instructional units, which is our MESP unit, our paras, our clerks, and so forth, we are tentatively set for June 15th to open those positions externally. However, we do take some on a case-by-case based on the needs of the schools. District units are currently frozen pending the budget review, which is typical at this time. For certification, we have quite a few changes on certification. As you know, when we went into our COVID Safer at Home, people couldn't access classes, people couldn't go to testing sites and so forth. So those teachers, certificated individuals who have renewals, so for example, if my professional certification expires June 30th of this year, I'm now extended to December 31st to meet my coursework, my MIP points and so forth that are required for renewal. Bullet number 2 is we have new statute that says that if a teacher is teaching intensive reading kids, those are our level 2 or level 1 students in intervention courses for reading, that they must be endorsed with reading or certified in reading. That has been extended to say that we can still continue them in field through December 31st while they continue to work on their certification requirements. For all other out-of-fields, typically June 30th is the date that you have to meet your goals for that year to complete your out-of-field. Those were told by the state, the statute was told, and we have now until July 31st for our out-of-field employees to complete their coursework to become in-field. And that is it for employment services.
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
Yes, I have two questions. At the bottom of the last bullet, it says, in the rare case an employee is still unable to meet this requirement for reasons beyond their control, Employment Services Division will undergo a district out-of-field extension review process.
So an example of that is, let's say one of our employees has coronavirus or has an extenuating circumstances, we can apply for them to have an extension beyond these dates. It's rare, it does happen. We are generous and we always rather ask for that extension than not, and so we work with those individuals individually.
Gosh, it certainly sounds like you're providing all the support that you can, continuing to.
Yes, and as you know, Diana Thompson is a master of certification, and she keeps up and tracks all of that, and she also works hand in hand with those employees, so I give
And
that credit to her.
My last question is, where are we with student workers? I know in the past, we've had quite a few kids that have been able to work with us over the summer and do internships for course.
So the numbers of student workers have dwindled over the years. We still have them. I can tell you in employment services alone, we have 3 student workers. They are considered part-time employees, and right now all part-time employees are not at work. They're furloughed until we can come back. We still have them. They're based on department. So, for example, if finance came up and said, hey, we could really use just a little bit of extra work, and we have this student that may be pursuing something in that area, we would bring them on as a student worker to complete those tasks. We still do use them.
That's good to hear, because I know a lot of students that had internships through their colleges or so on in different cities and places, those were canceled, and now they're home.
Right.
So anything we can do to provide some work and support to them, especially, you know, in a win-win situation when we really could use it, then that would really be great.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I don't know if any of you have been impacted by this, but I've been hearing that a lot.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Before we move forward, I do want to bring something to the board's attention, because on here, we're talking about a lot of hiring still. And as a board, again, I want to cautious us, because we're going into a fall and we're not 100% sure what it's going to look like. And when we're hiring people, but then they're not in the schools or something, I just think that it would behoove us to really pay attention at who we are hiring. Instructional, I can see that or whatever, but I think we should be extremely cautious, you know, for our funds, because we know that we're looking up to maybe 10 to 30% budget cuts. So I think we probably should be paying close to that. And then also, we will be in the middle of a transition with a new superintendent coming in July, and we might be also putting her in a box that, you know, with the budgets and stuff like that. So I'm throwing that out there. I think we need to
You say
pay.
the district was frozen.
Yes, sir.
And also,
But we're not talking about district, we're talking about non-instructionals and the other positions. So district level, yes, there's a hiring freeze on that. But like the non-instructional, like how many are we hiring? What positions are they? Like, are we paying close attention? Because again, we don't necessarily know what the fall is gonna look like. In a perfect world, our brick and mortar schools are gonna be open and everyone's gonna be there. But we keep hearing about a second wave. We don't know what's going to happen. So I just, again, cautious this board and administration.
Wouldn't that be on the staffing plan, on the
So the school staffing plan is approved, but, and I know Reverend Cummings could attest to this. So yesterday, we had one of our budget committee meetings,
Yeah.
and one of the things we talked about, and this is why we're saying tentative on non-instructional, because we do have budget concerns, and we really have to look at the budget on what we can afford, and so we are going to roll out non-instructional very cautiously, tentatively, June 15th. It doesn't mean every position, but that may be the first wave of what we'll release for posting based on what we're seeing in the budget review and so forth. So
And-
it is going,
You kind of segue into what I was going to say towards the end. I did meet with the budget committee yesterday, and we're looking at some of those things, Ms. King, and you're absolutely right. We're going to have to be very wise, and we're going to have to see what's really going on. I asked this group, Ms. Dobbins, Dr. Grantham, and Teresa as well, to make sure that you guys, that they get with each and every one of you individually, because you need to see what I saw.
We do, right, because this
We
is a
have some-
board.
Yeah, we have
We're a
some.
board.
Yeah, we're a board. We have some serious considerations in the next few weeks. We looked at 15%, 10, was it 10, 15?
if it's
15,
15%, yeah.
and it could be closer to 30, that what we have to really adjust out. There's going to be some,
Correct, because we're Florida, we
Adjustments.
receive our revenues from tourism. And
Correct.
Disney World, SeaWorld, Busch Gardens, none of these places are open. Our beaches,
Right.
our hotels, and that's how we receive our money. So it's common sense to know that, we are going to be affected at some point. And, now is the time to do our due diligence and pay close attention so we're not 6 months, a year later, scrambling or having to fire or let people go.
Right.
Because I'm telling you, nothing, and Nancy, you went through this, nothing is worse than letting our employees go. It's terrible, and I don't ever want to be in a position to let any of our employees go.
and that was one of the things that Ms. Boston Ellis and I talked about, Dr. Grantham, Ms. Dobbins. We don't want to have to get to a position where we're giving people pink slips and losing people to other districts because we didn't do our homework and we didn't do what we need. We didn't make the proper adjustments. Right now, we're in a situation where we're going to have to, let me say this, we're going to have to make some adjustments. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about that. And I think once you see that, we're going to have to, there's going to be changes with referendum money coming in. There's going to be changes with a lot of things coming in. And we're going to have to make some tough decisions. And people are going to look at us crazy because we're making those decisions, but it's to keep people employed and not to get people fired or have to be laid off. But we have to still provide what we have to provide for our
Correct,
students.
and I believe our employees is like 80% of our budget, and that's huge.
exactly right.
So this is when we really need to be.
So
thinking.
So I would appreciate if they could get with each of us individually
Yes.
as soon as possible, because I don't want to be sitting at a workshop getting the information.
Right.
I want to be able to have those conversations one-on-one
That was-
very quickly.
That was going to be my comments towards the end, but I'm glad Ms. Dobbins already hit it, so I don't have to say it now. I got it wrote down, budget, every board member. That was my note, because we want to make sure you guys see what I saw,
Okay.
so that we'll be prepared and it won't surprise anybody.
And those are all great points, and again, we're in unprecedented times. It's not just Florida that is suffering, it's every state, that has been impacted. So I also really do believe that we are going to get support from different areas in different ways, while at the same time, we are a school system and we are charged with educating kids. And we have to do all we can to ensure that our classrooms are not impacted. And I believe we move closer to that year after year after year, making sure that if we're going to be considering cuts of any kind, that it's not classroom first, it's classroom last.
Right.
And somehow we will figure out a way to handle the rest of it, because that is our business. That is the core and the crux of our business. So I do hear the importance of being conservative and being mindful, and thank God we've got Teresa Boston Ellis with her wealth of experience and always having a very sharp pencil. So I believe together we will get through this. But I don't want the community or our employees to think that we're already looking at ways to reduce support in the classrooms when we don't even know what well, we do know what our kids are gonna be like when they come back. They're gonna have all of the typical needs and then probably a lot of new needs as well. So I just want to make sure that coming from this board member, that's going to be my focus.
Right. And we have employees here that are all student-centered, and I think we can be creative and make sure that our classrooms are not impacted.
Well, I'm with you, ladies, I'm with you, but a lot of times when things have to change, everything has to change. So I just want us to keep an open mind. We don't want the classroom to be affected, but it's a great possibility that they may be affected in some small way, and we have to make sure that if they are affected, that is minimal at the smallest. But when you see the information that I saw, you'll understand why I'm saying what I'm saying, because there's real probability that every position in this district may be affected. That's just being real.
Well, I think then it's time for us to see the numbers that
You'll
you're
get it.
seeing, because I'm alarmed right now what you're saying. But I do know that, I mean, like I said, common sense is telling me that I know that there will be some things.
And I don't want anybody to panic, not saying panic, please don't panic, but I want us to be conscious that we have to move forward with wisdom.
And it's all about allocation of
Yes,
resources.
exactly.
And what we have learned over and over and over again is that when the support is not provided at the foundational level, we
Right.
pay heavily
Right.
later, and so
Right.
does the community.
And like Ms. King just said, we know where our revenue comes from. We know where, and we know those places are not open. So we would be crazy to sit here and just spend, and we know that we don't have it coming in. That doesn't make sense.
Especially when guidance is slow to come. You know, we haven't heard of a lot of potential support that we may be getting from lots of different areas, and until we get direct commitments of dollars, we have no choice but to really, really be very, very mindful of where our resources are
Right.
being targeted.
Yeah, because if our major attractions are closed a fourth of the year, basically, then that's a fourth of the income that comes from tourism.
A whole quarter of income.
Yeah, it's right there. So I'm sure they can kind of do a snapshot of that. But then there's other industries that, it's been amazing. They've made a ton of money.
Yes.
I bought a new Suburban the other day, and I said, are y'all going to give me a good COVID deal? He goes, we had the best month in April we've had ever.
People had time to shop, I don't know.
So there are people still, there's money still coming in, but the tourist money is where we're going to be hit with. And so I'm sure they're already pegging those dollars. Whatever percentage that is, that's what we're going to be hit with.
So Ms. Dobbins, Dr. Grantham, and Ms. Barcelos, you guys go ahead and start scheduling with the other board members so that,
Looking forward to that.
thank you.
Before you go, will you mention the Medicaid position that is,
Yes.
we need to
Yes.
hire?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
you get it, okay.
Yes.
So we do Medicaid reimbursement in our district. On average, right off the top of my head from what I saw yesterday, our average is we get reimbursed approximately $3.5 million to $3.7 million a year. This last year, we have gone through a Medicaid bookkeeper. We currently have our third posting for a Medicaid position for the bookkeeper. That bookkeeper's sole responsibility, and this unit is in ESE, sole responsibility is to do all the accounting and all of that to seek that reimbursement, but it hinges on our teachers doing their responsibility on reporting. We call it the random sample. It's not a drug test, it's just a random moment in time where they have to record what they're doing and so forth. And that's all generated through the Medicaid program. And then also our therapists, our speech therapist, our OT, PT, even our transportation of ESE students all has a piece that can be reimbursed. Our school counselors also have a piece that can be reimbursed. So there's a lot of potential of money being brought in. Because we have transitioned that position now going on the third time, our Medicaid is projected to only be $1.5 million. It is less than half of what we should be collecting back. So we have posted even though our district positions are frozen, we did post that Medicaid bookkeeper, and we need to get someone in that position. And we also have to look at it more than just a person. We need an accountability piece to that, and we need a training piece to that. And those are things we discussed in that meeting yesterday on how do we get our teachers to understand it? How do we get our teachers to participate and do their part? And how do we have the oversight to do that effectively? And those are the things that we have to bring back in. We should not be leaving money on the table when it comes to something as simple as reimbursement.
And that was one of the conversations when I said it may affect classrooms. One of the things that I learned in that meeting is that the teachers have to have a piece that they need to do, and they need to see the importance of doing that piece because it affects us number-wise. So when we make like when I say it may touch the classroom, that's one of the areas that I'm talking about where we have to put some accountability on staff to get that information into us. And you can't keep having the principal going back to the teacher saying, we haven't gotten it, we haven't gotten it, we haven't gotten it. We need to get it and get it in so we can get those funds.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, summer feeding program has begun or will begin, and I'll tell you too, it's normally supposed to be the first day of instruction, but Ms. Johnson said she wanted to do it because COVID was going on earlier. So it should start on June 15th. She bumped it up a week to begin on June 8th. So the summer feeding program typically mirrors the same date as summer school, but she bumped it up a week because of COVID, and she's going to start doing it on June 8th.
So they're going to get a good week break.
Yeah. About a week, yes, sir.
They need it. They really need that.
Well, the people that are delivering the food
Right.
are worn out.
Yeah.
They're really tired.
Yeah, they really need
And
it.
a lot of folks that work in I don't want to, everybody in this district's tired of talking about COVID, but we're going to pick it back up June 8th.
Good.
As things are slowly reopening, are we seeing any decrease in the participation, or is it stable or increasing?
I think, Kevin, you
It's stable.
think,
They're still, yeah, they're still getting those meals. Yeah.
9,000 a day.
and then when, I see on Twitter, when someone misses a bus stop, they reply to Twitter, where was my,
Listen, they're calling me.
Right.
If they if they could not get to their stop, where's another stop that I can get to get it? So that is a legitimate need that we're meeting, so.
So this is from Teresa, from Reverend Cummings. Here's our budget timeline. If you back it up, September 8th to August 6th to July 28th to July 23rd, you will, if it's okay, we'll start shooting out invitations for maybe Tuesday of next week or Wednesday of next week to meet with us about the budget. Ms. King, whenever y'all can, meet with us. The budget, district staffing plan, non-instruction, all that goes hand in hand. Org chart, everything goes together. But if you see, we got to bring it to you on the 23rd, and then it has to be the final budget hearing is September 8th. And that seems like a long time away, but it's not. So we'll start having those conversations. And I'll ask the group maybe to shoot for 45 minutes to an hour to talk to you, so no longer than that, and we'll get you in and show you everything that Reverend Cummings saw yesterday. And Mr. Orr, you did say it, Miss Boston Ellis knows her stuff. She generally can guess right on the dot, so she has a pretty good.
We're really blessed to have her.
Yeah, and Ms. King, you're right. We're not, and so I think since January, we haven't hired district position. We just froze them because we knew this was coming. Knew it was coming. So we've been very frugal, so far. I believe that is all. Did that give you the whole summer school? I hope that gave you a lot of information to be able to talk about.
Yeah.
Any questions? All right, thank you all.
We're gonna take a recess. It is now 10:30. Let's take a 10-minute recess, okay?
Just some things to review with you, and you can see this.
Those of you on the phone bridge, can you hear audio? Check. I need to be able to talk to people.
Kevin, this is Laurel, and I can hear audio.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. All right.
Yeah, this is Nancy. I can hear it too.
Thank you. We'll resume momentarily.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I know.
Give them a little what they want. Me too. So I will just stay. To administrator.
Okay, we're back on the record. We're going to continue with our work session, administrative briefing work session with our Ms. Lori Lively, 2020-2021 General Insurance Renewal Review.
Good morning again. The general insurance has actually been moved to June 4th, and I wanted to explain to you what happened with that so you would be aware as to where we stand currently. We have this meeting every year in May. We go over all the insurances that are not health-related, non-benefit related, property, casualty, our liability coverages. Typically, by now, we would be at a point where we would be filling out applications and securing binders for July 1st. And we ran into a snag with the property insurance carrier. It's been widely talked about the last few months that the property market has hardened significantly, creating issues in getting good rates and renewals. In fact, Teresa had talked to me about hearing the same in her financial circles. So our current property carrier, who carries the bulk of the risk on our property, has come back with a renewal that in no way is favorable to the district whatsoever, both from a cost perspective and a coverage perspective. So we asked the broker to go back out to the market, come back with another option for us program-wise that would be more palatable, and they will be communicating that through a presentation on June 4th, so that's why you will not see it today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lively. Appreciate it. Any questions, guys?
No,
Any
just
public comment?
yeah, thank you. Ms. Lively, you always do a great job. Thank you.
All righty.
Okay, so now we're moving on to the health insurance presentation on the self-funding. What I want to say about this is our last presentation in terms of gathering data, giving you actuarial numbers, talking about all the things we have been talking about for several months. This is the last information that you'll receive as far as being updated and ahead of giving consensus on what you would like to do going forward. So we're going to have Thomas Buss speaking. We've got Sharon Leach with Gallagher here to go over the actuarial information, and then we'll talk about at the end what we are planning as far as going forward and what your interest is to go beyond this point. And I'm going to go ahead and let Thomas start.
Ladies, gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for having me today. It's an honor to be here in person versus digitally, so thanks for the invitation. As we've discussed in months past, we've continued to monitor Marion County Public Schools health program claims trend with laser focus as we're looking at a major material consideration of transitioning your program. So what we want to present to you today is a quick update through April from Florida Blue claims data that was paid out in that month. A couple key statistical highlights for you. As we look at April of 2020, right, we know COVID is having an impact, but we're going to touch on how that impact's really affected your bottom line here in a minute. And we compare that to April of 2019. Pleased to report that April to April, 19 to 20, you're down 15% in claims, which is about a $250,000 decrease in total claims spend. As we compare month to month, April of 20 to March of 20, just month over month, a slight increase on your inpatient claims, but a decrease in both outpatient, physician, and what's of interest is your pharmacy claims did tick up a considerable amount. So what that equates to is the insurance carriers have all stated that we're removing all authorization requirements. If you need your medicine for longer periods of time, you want to go once. So what's everybody done? They've gone to the pharmacy, they've picked up the medications they need, potentially in higher quantities, to limit the number of trips, right, relative to COVID. So that I think speaks to your pharmacy trend. So the key indicators that we look at year over year, so now I want you to think in terms of 2020 versus 2019, rolling 12 months, how are we performing? Inpatient down over 6% over those 2-year periods. Outpatient down just about a point. Physicians up about 3 points, that's primary care and specialty. Pharmacy up 19%, right? So that speaks to the conversation we just had. But overall, the statistic that we trend is what's called per member per month. So as you look at 2019 versus 2020, you're up only 3% per member per month over those 2 rolling 12-month periods. which is an excellent trend, well below medical and pharmacy trend nationally. So as we continue to look in fluctuations in claims costs month over month, today is going to be a recommendation to you on what we feel is confidence in transitioning your health plan. We'll get into those specifics and answer any questions you may have, of course, but we're going to continue to watch this as we move forward for any major material changes. COVID. You heard in our last presentation from our actuarial partner, Gallagher Insurance, through Sharon Leach, who's on the call with us electronically today. Just to speak to that, if you'll remember, she indicated that everybody's staying at home, so they're not going to get their elective procedures, right? She also indicated that she looked nationally, she looked state of Florida, and then she looked here in Marion County. And she put together a bar graph that showed us a dip in the claims that summer and COVID is going to have, because people are limiting their access to elective procedures. They're not going out of the house. They're not seeing their doctor. They're not going, right? But there's still some concern, well, what's COVID going to cost? Well, we're pleased to report that the COVID paid claims is still well under only $10,000 district-wide. That includes testing and treatment, okay? So as you look to infection rates, and this was spoken to earlier this morning in Marion County, our numbers remain fairly conservative and very flat, which is a blessing for each of us in our community compared to some other urban markets. So Sharon proposed, the actuary proposed, that initially, on a conservative waypoint, we think that your claims cost over the entire 2020 plan year could decrease 1.4% because of COVID, the dip during the summer in elective claims, and then it's going to come back in the fall, right? People are going to rush back. I still have to have that procedure, and I need to get back in to see my doctor as soon as we're past this, as soon as possible. So we expect that spike in the fall. That being in consideration, that was with a 2.5% infection rate in Marion County. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're not even at 0.5% in Marion County. So what that means is you think of the statistical data and you think of dollars, that 2.5% infection rate was suggesting that overall this year you're going to see a $500,000 decrease in paid claims as a district, even with a spike in the fall. And that was a 2.5% infection rate. So when you drop it down to a COVID infection rate of under 0.5 point, what that's going to look like is potentially decrease in approximately 3% of paid claims, even with the spike, closer to $1 million in lower paid claims in 2020. Excellent, right? Difficult time. But as you think of this and opportunities, now may be a great time to continue our conversations with next steps as we've reviewed carefully. I have Laurel Lingle, our wellness coordinator, on the line. She's our Vanna White today. Laurel, if you'll change the slide. She's sharing her screen from her computer. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, the next slide speaks to the other component of where we are today and what the offer on the table is for next year is current fully insured health plan. Florida Blue did provide us through April claims, as I just outlined, from their underwriting department on your current fully insured current plans, 4 different plan designs, as you'll recall, all remaining the PPO network of benefits, at a plus 4.6% increase over the current rates. However, upon further consideration, their management came back, and in lieu of that 4.6, they've offered you a rate hold of 0% for January 1st, 2021, if you remain fully insured. All right, seems attractive, okay, but those are the facts on the table. I also want to point out to you your ProShare agreement. Remember, that's the surplus and underwriting profits that you currently share with Blue Cross. If it's a profitable year, the district receives 50% of it back. Blue Cross keeps 50% of those profits, right? What they're also proposing along with this 0% increase is if we enter into a new 3-year ProShare agreement, they're willing to offer 100% of the profit sharing back to Marion County Public Schools. They would receive none. So that's another investment into Marion schools with an intention of keeping you fully insured as is today. Our analysis to that effect, as well, we're very grateful for that recommendation and that opportunity, is that investment into Marion County schools, I would offer, could be more short-term in nature. What we're going to talk through today is maybe a longer-term strategy, and we're going to weigh the options. And I hope to answer any question you have so you all make the educated decision that you choose to for the future of your health care program. But we want you to have all the facts. So on the table now, 0% increase with Florida Blue with that revised profit sharing agreement. Laurel, next slide, please. As a reminder, you'll remember this from prior presentations. I just want to revisit these very briefly. We call it T-charts. It's pros and cons. So I want to just go through these quickly and remind you, today fully insured, that's this slide's illustration. The pros to that is we've got a very stable, predictable cost model, right? We know every month, here's your bill. You pay it to Blue Cross, regardless of the number of claims you have. That's your bill, right? And the numbers of enrolled members we're insuring. We have the ProShare dollars. We've had some success with that. We have $1.8 million in ProShare reserves currently on hand. We're expected to receive another $2 million in 2021 through the end of the accounting period that we're starting. I'll touch on that in a minute. Blue Cross is on the risk. If we have a $5 million claim, Blue Cross pays for it, right? So the insurer, Blue Cross, would be responsible for all of the filings, the administration, actuarial work, as we've seen for years. However, on the other side of the T-chart, if you stay fully insured, we know that there's a higher administrative cost. Blue Cross's margin is higher in that model with them being on the risk. We have certainly seen the challenges year over year of the renewal increase equation, okay? This year, a little different animal. The insurer can retain any surplus in funds if claims are less than expected. And then with the Affordable Care Act, I'll close with this, there are requirements on a fully insured program still under federal law with the Affordable Care Act in place, which has not been repealed, right, still the law of the land, that we have to comply with that limits some of our flexibility in plan design and what we can and cannot do for the employees of Marion County Public Schools, all right? Conversely, next slide please, Laurel, as we go to pros and cons in the program we're considering moving forward, self-funded. So pros to going self-funded, you can see in the data that you've reviewed in the past, and you'll see again today, significant lower administrative costs. You're going to see significant rebates and sharing on the pharmacy program, future opportunities to tailor your formulary and receive monies back. All of the surplus, if we have a healthy year, it's all yours. Because instead of paying those premiums to Blue Cross, what are we doing? We're paying Blue Cross an administrative fee to still pay our claims, manage to the network, right, be our partner. But we're paying the claims as Marion County Public Schools. There's your differentiator. The district is paying those actual plan costs, not operating expenses, and certainly the access to data that we'll see on a self-funded chassis will help us further tailor your wellness programs, your pharmacy programs, access to care across the community, potential clinic partnerships to generate return on investment. On the opposite side, cons, if we go self-funded, let's not forget, as I mentioned previously, we pay the claims. Lori's going to speak to you later in the presentation about working with finance to set up an appropriate program on what pool of money is that coming from, how's that going to be managed to so it's done responsibly. We know we have to make sure that we meet the state's requirement. The OIR stands for Office of Insurance Regulation, right? We have to maintain adequate reserves. Ladies and gentlemen, that's about $7.6 million. We've talked about the importance of that number. How do we get there? We'll talk about that further in a minute. We pay for all of our operational, think of those as the fixed costs of the program. And then the stop-loss insurance. So when we say self-funded, where we're paying all these claims, I want to remind each of you, stop-loss insurance is a component of this program. We're up to, at this current time, a $350,000 deductible on a per-claim scenario. You then have a reinsurance or stop-loss policy that would assist you for any claimant over and above that amount of money, right? So you're not fully liable for all of those claims charges, right? Going back to that multi-million-dollar claim. That's why we have stop-loss insurance in conjunction with self-funding. Laurel, next slide. So as we maintain our focus today to make sure you're fully educated around self-insuring or partially self-insuring your program with coordination of stop-loss, I'll speak again to the reserves. So $7.6 million, we're going to need to show the state of Florida over a 2-year period that we have that allocated for claims liability for your employees in this district to make sure you're financially solvent. The administrative fee. So when you see administrative fee to insurance carrier and you hear the acronym ASO, that's Administrative Service Organization. Blue Cross is your ASO partner. We're still using their network. We see their doctors. You know, we're still in the Blue Options PPO. So point of impact to the employees, and this is very important. If we make this transition, their ID cards still say Florida Blue. It still says Blue Options PPO. They can still maintain the current doctors they all have today, hospitals, pharmacies, all that stays the same, right? It's just a manner in which we're funding and paying the claims liability on the back end and what's the most fiduciarily responsible approach. Stop-loss insurance, we've covered. Claim lasering, this is very important and one that we're going to be watching very carefully. Any self-funded program has the option for lasering liability to where if it's an ongoing claim over and above a certain threshold, remember, any claim above that $350,000, the stop-loss insurance company is going to look at and say, hey, is it continuing? What's the ongoing reoccurring liability to that claim? And is there the possibility for us to laser that off of your policy? We can buy additional insurance to protect against that in the future, or we can do the math, which we'll show you, actuarially sound, to assess the risk of what's the better financial decision with lasering. ProShare dollars, as you just saw, Blue Cross is now offering a 3-year new ProShare accounting with 100% of any of those profits being given back to the district. We'd lose that if we go self-funded, but I would counter that with saying, ladies and gentlemen, you get to keep 100% of any of the dollars you don't spend on health care as you go self-funded, because you're funding the claims, right? So our goal would be, how do we stay healthy? How do we create a good program so you do keep 100% of that surplus every year, right, long term? Now, we're having a great, as reported on the first slide, a great series of years, claims years. You don't want to make this transition during a bad claims year. Well, now's the timing is very good for this consideration, right? Claims are stable and a great opportunity to consider self-insurance. You're going to hear me reiterate this over and over again throughout the remainder of this presentation, plan funding. When you consider a transition to self-insurance, ladies and gentlemen, it's very, very important that you don't bet against yourself. The actuaries don't get this wrong very often. And when we look at underwriting results and we say, how do we make sure we're setting aside and budgeting enough premium to pay for the claims liability based on the trends we know year over year? And instead of just year to year, I want you to remember that term, year over year, long term. It would be my pleasure to come to you in the future and never have to say we're going to be fighting a 14% rate increase again, double-digit increases, right? Those are our challenges. If we manage to this in a way that I think is well thought through, we limit that year-over-year budget challenge, right? It's shorter, but shorter with fully insured, and it's a much longer strategy at a lower risk point if we consider self-funding. So we're going to talk about funding strategy at the end as we look at costs, which I know is a key consideration. Okay, with that, I'm going to transition to Sharon Leach. She is our actuarial partner with Gallagher Insurance. Sharon, can you hear us okay via Zoom? All right. I can see her. Sharon, have you dialed into the bridge number 671-4121 on your cell phone?
That's the exact number she should dial.
Okay, Sharon, can you hear me? Nod your head if you can. Sharon, if you can hear me, please dial 352-671-4121. Yep, we see you. Maybe she can't hear me, Kevin.
She is, I'm sure she's dialed in. I think she's trying to use her computer
Okay, if you bear with me 1 second. Sorry about this, give us just a moment.
She can hear you, though.
Sharon, can you hear me? Nod your head, yes.
But she's not loud enough that she could see us. I think she can see us, but she can't hear us.
Ask Laurel if she can hear us.
Laurel, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, Thomas.
Thank you. Okay, she's got it dial in. Okay, I've sent her a message to try to dial in. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and proceed out of respect. And if she does connect and gets that message, I'll have her kind of tag team this with me, if that's okay. All right, we've seen this before. This is nothing new. Okay, Sharon, we still can't hear you if you can hear us. Dial into that bridge number I just emailed to you. Okay, on the next slide, from Gallagher Insurance, we have 3 columns here headed in navy blue. In the center, you see a proposed Florida Blue 2021 renewal. In the center, a self-funded comparative analysis with your savings projections on the far right column. Top line, you notice the claims differentiation between fully insured and what Florida Blue's underwriting is expecting based on assumptions below that we'll get to, comparing a $44.6 million claim spend if we stay fully insured versus 42.1. That's a $2.5 million difference, right? Significant and material. As I mentioned to you in the previous slide, you see retention and fixed cost. Look at administration and stop loss. So here's the key differentiation, which with a Florida Blue 0% increase kind of changed things from our last conversation. You see now that the retention and fixed cost on the Florida Blue 2021 fully insured renewal is $3.7 million. Compared to a self-funded of $5 million, at a difference of 1.2 or 1.3 million. We again are going to thank Florida Blue for that offer, but I'm going to remind this board that is a short-term flash of an investment for you all that I would offer is going to artificially lower your rates for 1 year. And as I would ask you to think into the future and consider us in this room 12 months from today, analyzing your January 1st, 2022 renewal, where will that leave us in a position financially? Well, they've artificially reduced our rates. Medical costs are still going up every year, are they not? Right? We're doing our best to stabilize them internally with our plan design, our program initiatives. But cost of medicine is not decreasing. So what we're in turn doing, if we accept a fully insured 0% increase, even though these costs may look a little lower than before, we're still going to show you savings self-funded, right? Is we're artificially putting ourselves potentially in a position to where that January 1st, 2022 renewal is back into this double-digit renewal negotiation. Because we have artificially lowered your rates again. Great for this year. What about future years? Correct. So there's your year-over-year differentiation I'm trying to drive home. Sharon, can you hear us now?
I can hear you.
All right, very good. Sorry to have hijacked your presentation, but now that you're on the line,
Okay.
I just finished speaking about the retention fixed costs and stop losses. I believe you heard. If you want to pick up from there at pharmacy rebates on the third line down and go through the rest. I'm sorry to have taken over, but go ahead.
Oh, no, that's perfect. That's great. I think you got it nailed, whatever it was, I think up to here. So the pharmacy rebates, those didn't change from the last time we did the projections last month. Excuse me. They are delayed, so that represents a half a year's worth of rebates. So you've actually earned $1.4 million during the year 2021, but you only get half paid in 2021 and the other half in 2022. Sometimes it actually goes up to a lag of 3 quarters. So it's just the way the rebates work. So those are understated they're on a cash flow versus accrual basis for this case. The total expense, the savings resulting from the differences in projections in the claims and the expenses ends up at $1.9 million, and I believe last time we were at about $2.7 million. One other difference is, I'm not sure if Thomas touched on this, but on the administration piece, we added in some technology at $2 per employee per month. We added a little bit more into the funding rate, so that increased your administrative expenses, your fixed fees. So overall, you're down to you have a 4% savings over the fully insured renewal that was proposed. They came in, I think Thomas said, at 0%, and they were projecting a 4.6% increase, but they are basically subsidizing it to get you to a 0%. I think that the 4.6 was on the high side anyway, and we were estimating it to be about 1.7. So they are helping you out with this 0% by reducing their increase. They also reduced their trend rate on the bottom. They were at 10.8. They went down to 9.9. We held ours steady. And the retention, that's the amount that's anything but anything paid that's not a claim expense, a claim, in order to reduce to a 0% increase, they lowered their retention to 7.7%. So in the end, your pro-share agreement will always give you back 50% of the difference. If you pay more in premium than claims and expenses, you'll get 50% of the difference. Since they're lowering their retention and trend, that difference will be less. So that pro-share agreement, pro-share amount may change going forward. And I think that's it on this page. Do you have any questions? Okay, so this is just telling you what happened between last month and this month of claim trend reduced. We maintained ours. The pro-share, they changed it to 100%, that next year, if you stay fully insured, you'll get 100% of the renewal, or the difference, as opposed to 50%. That's two of the things that the Blue Cross renewal did for you. They really want to keep you fully insured because they tend to make profit on that. The non-claim cost, I told you we put in the $2 per employee per month for benefit-focused technology. I mentioned that the retention went down from 11.74 to 7.7 in the renewal. And even when they reduced their retention from 11.74 to 7.7, their fixed costs are still higher than if you were to go self-funded. So you still have the savings from the administration piece. And I talked about the timing of the rebates already. So it's still a good position to be in right now. So go to the next, yeah, thank you. So, and you have to think about this long term, you know, in fully insured renewals, you kind of wait for your renewal each year. But if you go fully insured, you think of it more of the long term and all the things you can do to impact your costs and programs you can implement, which I know you already have a bunch of them implemented, especially on the wellness side. But we anticipate that you would save 1.9 to 2.6 million by moving to self-funded. You would be able to meet your OIR 60 days of claims, incurred claims, in 2 years. You get to that threshold. And we still think it's a good idea to go self-funded.
Very good, Sharon. Said in summary, fully insured, it's artificially short-term. Sounds great, but is not the recommendation. Self-funded long-term is going to maintain the current through the end of this presentation is our recommendation to you, and we're going to give you a roadmap of which we think is the most appropriate approach to how to get from A to B. A couple other highlights we want to cover for you. We will be brief. Again, the fixed cost, as Sharon mentioned, even with Florida Blues reduction, these fixed costs which we're about to go through, we're still at a lower total spend than a fully insured Florida Blue program. So I'm going to bring Lori back up. Lori wanted to touch on those self-funded fixed costs. Laurel, if you're already there. Thank you.
Okay, so this is a recap of what we've talked to you about before in terms of what we anticipate our expenses will be to bring this program in-house. What's primarily changed this time on the slide is what Sharon talked about, this $2 per member per month for the technology. If we go with the package that we have right now and continue that way, for transparency's sake, we believe that that's how much cost would be built in to our expenses. And again, we talked about ongoing need for actuarial services, consulting services, and building in to have a benefit specialist, both to assist with a transition with self-funding and a succession plan for our benefit program in our department. So this is basically a rough estimate of our costs, and as everybody has stated here, even with all of this and given the other factors, we still are on target to be able to save more money. And I would submit to you that, you know, while we again appreciate, as Thomas said, what Blue Cross has offered us, there's incentive there for them. Obviously, it impacts their revenue stream to do that, and it would be a short-term fix that I feel like we should not be blindsided on for the long-term goal with this. This has been looked at multiple times over the last 5 or 6 years, and we've never quite been in this position where we feel like we can really do this without a lot of risk. And once that window goes away and maybe claims change and go the other direction, we might not be able to do it a year or 2 years or 3 years from now. So I just want to make that point that, you know, being tempted by that short-term fix is not the long-term goal in saving money for the district overall.
Thank you, Ms. Lyons.
Thank you, Lori. Okay, Laurel, next slide, please. So what's the roadmap? How do we do this? 7.6 million in 2 years, right? So you all are in a fantastic position. You've got $1.8 million plus in reserves from prior pro-share accounting. Not many districts can say that, ladies and gentlemen. That's a great start. We just showed you a approximate 1.9 million in annualized savings if you're to make this transition in 2021 in total expenditures. There's your 3.7 million subtotal. As Sharon has calculated based on the COVID impact and the trends that we're seeing for claims incurred and paid in 2020 this year, as I mentioned, we're going to see a tick down, right? The accounting that we should receive in approximately the second quarter of next year, we'll see another cash injection to the district of approximately 2.2 million as we close out the current pro-share accounting agreement you're currently in. And we have verification from Florida Blue that cash accumulation will be yours and will be paid to Marion schools for your use as you considered self-funding. So you add all that together, there's 5.9 million. As compared to the 7.6 million that the state's going to require us we have aside, we've got a spread of 1.7 million, or about 3.6% over our current rates. Okay, so the state's target is one that we cannot forget. Laurel, next slide. So here are the recommendation factors, board. Right now, you're big enough, your claims are stable enough that you're going to see a more stable experience result year over year in transitioning to self-funding. We're going to attain more control over your plan design, how we administer the program, and risk levels as we look at stop loss each and every year. We're going to get more data. We'll have more reports to show with you. The wellness program is going to continue to grow exponentially. And the future risk avoidance is finally going to put you in the driver's seat where we think, listen, right now we only get a limited amount of information from Florida Blue because of the fully insured contractual requirements. Self-funding opens the gates for us to do a deeper dive to help longer term. So your claims recently certainly reinforced the transition. And here's the financial consideration where I take you back to being good stewards financially and fiduciarily around transitioning to a program like this. And there have been many school boards around the state of Florida that have struggled to where they have bet against themselves. They have said that, hey, I think we're okay not to listen to the actuarial guidance or the underwriting guidance. And we're going to say, no, we don't need to do this with rates. We're going to go lower. Where, in fact, the underwriter and the actuary were correct. And the increase that following year was right where they said it would be. And it's put you in a financial, or them, in a financial hole year over year. And it's been very difficult for them to come out of. So as a conservative recommendation, but one that we bring to you today for consideration, for 2021 is we're going to recommend developing the board cost rates, meaning all of the employees' current costs for the current 4 plans. No change. Still PPO. Still the same deductibles, same copays, everything stays the same at the employee level, including cost. But at the board level, what I'd like you to consider as we look at a multi-year over year strategy is considering rating your development as, and I don't want you to think of this as a rate increase. What I want you to think of this as is a placeholder, right? Remember, we're not paying Blue Cross every month, are we? You're simply saying, Thomas, you just, whatever the claims charges are, and Blue Cross's administrative fee, that's what we have to pay every month. So in the first quarter of next year, we're going to see a dip because our claims aren't ever that high as total premium equates, right? It's always less. There's your medical loss ratio. So we're going to start out 2021 well ahead, and it will come up, but we still believe we're going to be $2 million under. Right? So what I'm asking for the board to consider today in your objective is we still have to be very mindful that, as Sharon pointed out actuarially and nationally, medical trend, cost of healthcare every year, is still increasing at a rate of almost 7%. Pharmacy trend year over year, and this isn't just us or Florida, this is national. Pharmacy trends still increasing at a rate of almost 9%. Now, it's one of our national challenges. So what I don't want you to be put in a position of is in 2022 or 23 or 24, having too little set aside for that trend consideration. All right, so there's one point. It speaks to the multi-year strategy, and it certainly helps us with these long-term strategic goals because we're not giving all that money to the insurance company. And it also considers satisfying that state Florida Office of Insurance Regulation requirement in the first year. So the insurance committee has vetted this consideration, looked at all of the details at a deep dive. Mrs. McCall, I know she stepped out. She wanted me to reiterate she is in support of this. Has voted, and the committee has approved and recommended self-funding to that extent. But there's the recommendation in the roadmap, ladies and gentlemen, to put you in a position that in 2023, 2024, 2025, what I'd love for you all to be hearing from me for the first time maybe in the history of this district is look how well you've done. Oh, and by the way, you're $7-8 million ahead of where you need to be. So instead of 10%, 14%, 0%, this, we're right here. And that's budgetarily where I think every district in the United States wants to be. And further, helps us position your program, hopefully not just see this, but maybe we start to see this. Because we're going to create more programs with what we're going to have access to that you've already seen work. They're going to help drive that. I'm going to ask Lori to come back up. We've got the timeline transition, but I appreciate the opportunity to present that recommendation.
Thank you.
Also, to tag on to what Thomas said about funding at that 4%, I just spoke to another unnamed district that's a little bit larger than us, and they had indicated the last couple years they've not really been doing the right thing with the premium increases for their self-funding account, and now they're approaching panic mode because they realize that they're going to run into some trouble if they don't do something about it, and then how much can you do in one increment? So it's definitely a cautionary tale to fund appropriately, and we have the opportunity to start off the right way with the additional money that we have to do this right. As to the timeline, I've added at the bottom, you'll see the asterisk, the development of a self-insured health insurance trust, kind of speaking to what we were talking about managing the money. For those of you that have been on the board for a while, you may remember that we have a self-insurance trust for our property casualty program. Comes to you every 2 years. It basically just controls the processes and the people that manage that trust so that we know that anything that happens with those funds happens for those products and services only. So there are no issues when it comes time to reserving and having what we need to pay our claims, and I'm recommending that we do the same thing with the health plan if you decide to go self-funded. Drawing your attention to June 4th in red here, so all along we have said that this would be the day of our last presentation with this level and depth of information for you, trying to arrive on June 4th to meet deadlines with a consensus from the board. So I would ask you at this point, I've left that date, June 4th, open in case you had any pressing questions, any other concerns, give you time to digest it. If you felt like you needed that meeting, that was solely the purpose. We have no other information that we would plan on bringing back in a short time frame on the 4th. If you had any inclination today that you feel like you are good, you don't need to see or hear anything, have any questions answered, we can eliminate the June 4th date and move forward based on whatever decision you would like. So it's completely up to you if you feel like you need that additional time to digest and come back and say, we've thought about it, yes, no.
I personally think we probably still need that time because I'm sure we're going to get some questions. I'm sure people are going to start calling us, want to know some details, and we may have some questions at that time.
Okay.
So on the side of caution.
Okay, absolutely. That's why it was built in.
I will say,
on the surface completely right now.
Totally support this. I believe we have great people that have looked into this, and I know Board Member McCall has been in on the meetings, and I know she's asked a lot of the right questions. So I'm very, very much in support of this.
Likewise, and it doesn't hurt to continue with the well-thought-out timeline that we have in case we come up with other questions. From everything I've heard, I feel like having the ability to more locally control our fixed costs, our admin costs, our risk levels is really, really important for the unique needs of our district. So I commend you for taking a very complicated and difficult topic for a lot of people to hang with and presenting it at a level where I'm really, really very comfortable, and thank you very much.
And it's something we've been talking about for a long time. This is not.
Yeah, it has been
This
going
is
on.
not a knee-jerk thing that's going on. I've been on this board for all these years, and we've talked about it and talked about it. And we even said 6 years ago, we're waiting for the time to be right. And so I think y'all have impressed me that the time is right.
Yeah, I trust Ms. Lively also, because I think actually initially we had a little bit of discussion, and Ms. Lively's like, look, hey, no, there is never, and very skeptical. So I am positive that homework has been done, and this was very well presented, and thank you for making it easier for us to understand, because it is complicated, and that's where Ms. Lively and Thomas, your skill set is definitely coming through right now, so thank you.
So we will come back on the 4th to tie everything up, and according to the schedule, we will have a formal board vote at a board meeting for June 23rd.
I definitely think your presentation on the 4th will be very short.
You should not say that. As soon as you say that, that doesn't ever happen.
We're going to plan for it to be short, 15 minutes.
If you have anything in the interim that you find that you would
We'll
like us to add
reach
for
out
the
to you.
4th, if you'll let us know so we can be prepared for any of
I can
that.
tell you, I won't have anything because this is so far above my pay grade that there is absolutely I have no clue what you guys are doing. You're the professionals, and I have utmost confidence in you because I will come up with nothing. Okay? That's
I do have one question, though. So if an employee does get very ill and need like Mayo or something, they can still receive that, correct? Okay, that's what I wanted to confirm. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Any public
Thank
comment? There being none. Mr. Ellers?
Good morning, Chairman Cummings, Vice Chair Thrower, board members, Mrs. Green, Dr. Mayor, Mrs. Lopez. I will try to keep this concise. We only really have a couple outstanding items left with the Code of Conduct that I wanted to bring back with you. We're looking at a couple of language changes that we wanted to bring back to you, and then you had asked for some information on recidivism in the drug diversion program. The two issues that we had left were horseplay language and the dress code about slides and flip-flops, a prohibition on that. The horseplay issue, my recommendation is really we can do one of three things. Just eliminate the language that we had inserted and go right back to where we were. It is not a huge issue. This language was only put in with level 1 offenses and in the primary codes, and to be honest, from a principal's opinion, neither one of those should ever generate a referral. The teacher ought to be handling that in their classroom generally with a minor consequence. But teachers are allowed to refer those types of things under a referral. So we did want to include some language so parents couldn't argue. We could add language in a narrative section, and I wrote up a sample bit of language where we talk about discipline in general, just to say that rough play is inappropriate in an educational setting and can be subject to disciplinary action. So that way, a principal can pull out the code of conduct and point, rough play isn't an excuse for getting into trouble, and sort of cut that argument a little bit off at the knees. And then I'm open to any other suggestions you guys may have with this.
I think, I mean, that's possible. I don't know if we've had that many problems with it, I hate every time the code of conduct comes up, we have to make more rules. I mean, I don't know, but we never take away rules. We just keep adding rules. And so I don't know if making it more rules just so the parents can't have a leg to stand on if they want to address it. Scary. You know, I just think we've covered it. We've expelled kids. We've sent kids to alternative ed. We've done all kinds of things. I don't think we need any language that's any different than what we've always had. I mean, I don't know what kind of problems we've had that incited for one. See, sometimes one person can come to a committee with this idea, and that's what I hate rule by committee sometimes, because sometimes they've got a strong voice and they more or less delphi the entire group, and the group comes on and goes, oh yeah, we need this. And then when it comes back down to it, well, why do we need it? Tell me the example of the situation why we need it. But nobody can think of an example, but this person delphis the committee and has them all convinced the sky's gonna fall if we don't put another rule on top of the kids' backs. So, I don't know. I don't see any sense in changing anything.
What bothers me, and I've experienced this, is that it's the definition of rough play. And young kids especially should not be written up for assault and being offered up to go to an alternative school just because
They play rough.
they play rough and
That's-
pass some hits or whatever.
And we definitely are not doing that. Again, even if we left the language in with horseplay, it would have been a level 1 offense, which is something like a parent phone call, a, timeout, something of that nature. However, putting this in the narrative section is more of just our narrative section is more of a broad policy statement about behavior. It does. But
I can give an example, and what comes up to my mind is probably 2 years ago, and there was a female student that was choked by another student, and he was rough playing, or whatever they called it. He was playing, but she was being choked and couldn't breathe, and then she kicked him off of her, and then she was disciplined, self-defense. So it was addressed that he was playing, rough playing, but it wasn't. So you just asked for example, and that's what came to my mind. So sometimes there is a difference of just playing, but there's sometimes rough play and it's not play. And it's probably a fine line in some circumstances. Every situation is different, I'm sure, with every classroom, every teacher, and every student. But it does happen.
The issue in that one, he was in trouble for doing that.
Well, from my point of view, and I'm coming from a law enforcement point of view now, anytime you're doing something to someone that could cause them to expire,
That's not rough
that's
play.
not play.
That's an assault.
Correct, but you were not sitting on this board, and it was identified as play, and that female student was disciplined because she kicked him off her.
Because she saved herself.
She,
Well,
yes.
see, that was the
it
big
did
issue. It
happen.
wasn't so much his side, because he did get in some trouble for that. But it was the fact that she defended herself. It goes back to the self-defense piece, really. That story was that caused a problem. And that she did get in trouble for self-defense.
That should never go.
So
I mean, it sounds like.
that's why we started saying, we want self-defense. We want those kids protected
Gotcha.
that want to defend themselves.
It seems like the consensus is that our existing language suffices, and we really don't necessarily need more language there. So we can move forward with that if you'd like. The next piece was about the flip-flop language. It's just, do we want to do a prohibition? I will tell you, the only information I will bring forward, and we will enforce as a district anything policy-wise you put into place. The consensus with our secondary is they feel like it is going to be a pretty heavy lift to enforce.
It's it's unenforceable.
Yeah, I go
Totally unenforceable. Unless we just drop all the math and English classes and we just do flip-flops, you know, it's unenforceable.
Ms. Green came up with a great idea. Do you want to share that?
Yes, Mrs. Green, in fact, I'll let you share if you don't mind.
I think I said it was a recommendation. That was 2
Yeah.
weeks ago. I can't remember
Right.
my idea.
You mentioned to me after the meeting to put something in there that the board.
I'd not recommend it.
Recommends and talk a little bit about our concerns with liability and kind of if you choose to wear slides, I mean, recognizing your concern.
That is not, it won't
It's not
fall on us.
liability. Yeah.
We
That's
could
my
do
concern.
that
That's my concern.
very easily. It's put in a slide or a sentence that says, secure footwear is the safest option on a school campus, and we can come up with a sentence, and that's pretty easy.
How would we be liable for
Right.
someone's flip-flops? I get so tired of the legalese part of this.
Well, I think what Chair Cummings was concerned about with the slides was kids kind of running across the street in front of buses or something. I can't remember the
Right.
hypo.
I see them pulling their pants up, not being able to walk either. I think stepping out of your britches is kind of tough. So do we want to go there too?
Or they're horse playing and a computer falls on their foot.
No, I don't think we need, we're good. I'm not worried about
I
that.
do like the idea of having a positive statement about what is proper footwear.
Footwear.
For
I don't want to go
the
to a
environment.
lawsuit angle or anything
For
like
the
that. Just-
environment. And to me, I'm not so much worried about the lawsuit, it's just kind of setting a little bit of a standard
Right.
for people to keep in mind. What they choose to do with that is going to be their own personal choice.
Right, but if they're reading it, as long as it's clear that there will not be that teacher that says, oh, you cannot wear flip-flops because the code of conduct says so. And I don't want that perceived either,
I
because
don't know
that's
that we need to go preaching to the parents. They know what their kids need to wear for shoes, and it's not
I
going to make a
think
difference.
we don't need to, you're right, we
They're
don't
not
need
going to
to,
make a
we don't need to
difference.
punish them on that. I'm not saying punish them, but we need to say something that, hey, this is the recommended, wear what you want to wear, if that's what you're going to do, but we don't need that on us as a board. Again, I've seen kids running across the street with shower slides or flip-flops on, and traffic is coming, and I'm like, if they had on shoes, they wouldn't, and it's a hazard. And I see it every day, almost every day.
Mr. Cummins, I was at a mall, and my husband's flip-flop got sucked up into the escalator.
Safety hazard. That's all I'm saying.
And he had to walk the rest of the mall with one shoe on.
That's all
Things
I'm
can happen, but, we can't, I don't
He
know.
didn't sue them all.
He didn't sue them all.
If
He's-
the opening was a little bit too wide, that would give somebody the ability to just create problems.
No, I don't think
But
we need to say any
again,
more than
I'm
we.
not as concerned as much about, we don't want all that litigious stuff, it gets crazy, but again, it's more important to me, as far as setting a standard for some type of appropriate.
We could just have a little thing. We'd like for our children to prepare for the future and being a good citizen and
And that's all he's saying.
this is the attire we'd like to see: a belt at the waist and no flip-flops. Things that what might like to see.
There is a general statement in the code that talks about the whole theme of why there is a dress code, that we
Dress
could
for
add something
success.
about appropriate dress for a work setting, and we could add something with footwear there as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
How about dress for success? That's what we both bingoed it at the same time. It came in our heads, and dress for success, and just ... and then just give them so the parents can kind of.
Different definitions of success, too, so see, we could go down a big old rabbit hole.
But like to not, and they're not going to wear a belt, but I'd like to see them wearing a belt, hold their britches up, but we even went through that years ago. We're going to make them wear a belt. I don't even remember. And all they
It's
did
in
was
the-
they designed their belt to fit their hips.
It's in the code of conduct that students are to have their pants firmly secured at their waist.
But I rest my case.
The last thing I want to share, and There was a request about recidivism and our success with our drug diversion program. And what I wanted to share out is just 3 years' worth of data. We can go deeper. It's going to require a little bit more. This is what we had readily available to pull, and want to commend one of my clerks, Rebecca Pena, who really put a lot of time, because each one of these had to be hand-checked and verified on whether they had had a further incident. You can see in 2017-18, we put 216 students through, 143 completed. Our success rate in completion was about 66%.
Okay.
Then our students who reoffended, it's a pretty low percentage, about 8%. And this is over the course of the last 3 years. So they could have reoffended that year, last year, or this current school year. So it's sort of a rolling number. If you look last year, we ran 171 students through. Again, about a 66% completion rate.
It's the same percentage rate every time.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that in a moment, because we did make a very significant change based on our mental health plan. We had 14 students reoffend. Again, the reoffense rate was fairly low. And then this year, and again, our numbers, and there's an asterisk there, is our last group of 43 students were scheduled to start after spring break, and they did not start. We're going to reschedule them for the first quarter of next year for those that didn't graduate. So our numbers don't really reflect exactly how many students were in diversion. But I want you to take a look, if you would, at our completion rate. This last year, we were able to add, with the mental health plan, we assigned our new social workers where they were required to help with instruction in our diversion program. What that allowed us to do is get our numbers down to about 10 students per class instead of about 25. And to be honest, they were able to really build relationships much more with those kids. And you can see our completion rate over those first 9 weeks was very high. So just walking in, and we always had one, either myself, Mr. Livingston, Mr. Clymer, or Mr. Corley were there every single time, walking through those rooms. And you could just see the tone was different. It was much more conversational. And we really think for this type of program, that approach was very, very positive. One of the best things we did with this program since it started. We do not have any students who reoffended or who completed and reoffended. So, but again, they've only been, out of the program for maybe a month. So those numbers we'll keep track of.
Yeah, it's been a little bit different.
But still,
The other
it's
thing,
encouraging.
it is very encouraging.
Completed, yeah.
The other thing I wanted you to be aware of is we do have an AmeriCorps worker that's paid for by the AmeriCorps grant that's going to be putting together a questionnaire to deliver to our students and to parents in our diversion program. So we'll be able to bring that to you next year when we do code of conduct as well. And that's all I've got for you, unless you've got some questions.
Having at least one caring adult and having options.
Absolutely.
Does a lot of good.
This is some encouraging
Yes.
information, some encouraging data. When you see between 8 to 12% of those who complete the program, only 8 to 12% reoffend. Love to get that number down even further, but this is good to have somewhere to jump off of and to shoot for.
And I think that grace piece comes into play here as well.
Yes.
And I had shared a story, and I was incorrect. I forgot there was one parent that did appear before the board, and if you remember, it was a young lady who had passed drugs along. She was a 6th grader. She was able to complete this program and move on with her middle school career
Probably changed her life.
pretty quickly. It could have, and I think that's an important piece. If nothing else, what this program does allow is a student who made a very poor decision one time to move on and be successful in school after they pay whatever price they need
They were
to do.
the babes in all of the drug stuff, and they don't and they stop it at the baby stage.
So let me ask a question.
Yes, sir.
Where does, because I know sometimes our parents say, they say we had to go by the code of conduct, we had to go strictly by what's there. Where's the discretion? Who has that discretion? Does the dean or principal have that discretion?
There-
Law enforcement has discretion. You know, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna approach this on certain things? Where's the discretion?
Basically, most of the code of conduct, there is built-in discretion. Part of the reason we built in some levels is so that we don't say, for instance, battery is always a level 3. Well, you know, battery is simple as going up and slapping somebody on the arm.
Right.
So we try to tier that. But additionally, anything at a level 3 basically and below, there is some discretion to move the consequence or action we take down to a lower level. There are certain things that are in the code of conduct that the board chose that are non-negotiables. Drug offenses are one of those.
Right.
There are a handful of others, typically those level 4 offenses, and there are things that you really don't want discretion on. You know, we don't want.
Who is it that has that discretion? Is it the dean, the principal, who?
I would argue that typically at a school, it starts with the dean. I think any kind of significant lowering, I would hope, goes to an assistant principal for discipline in the secondary schools and is run by the principal. Ultimately, the principal, by statute, is the one that issues anything other than an alternative placement and an expulsion. So it really is ultimately the responsibility of the school principal.
So whether or not it comes out of the school is the discretion of the principal.
Yes, with the exception that there are things
Right,
that you as a board have said, we want to see a recommendation to the superintendent with an expulsion packet.
Right, I got you.
And that way it's in your hands.
Got you.
But I have talked to principals through the years, not just on the board, but through the years for different reasons about this. And often they're afraid to use their discretion because at the district level, they're afraid they will get reprimanded for not doing the serious district thing. So they kind of don't tend to use their discretion as much as they would like to sometimes. And I would like for them to understand the freedom of that discretion, that they will not get any backlash from the district if they didn't handle it the way, say, the deputy superintendent would or someone, because
Do you guys do any training with that?
Oh, yeah. We talk to them and talk about that situation. I will say this, just personally, and I'm going to go back to when I was a principal. When I would call Mr. Vianello, he was always very open about discussing, you've got some discretion. I will tell you, in our position, the way we've structured things, they call Mr. Clymer, Mr. Corley, and Mr. Livingston, and they talk through that. That's one of the strengths of the structure that we put in place, is that they do have somebody that they can bounce through, because the black and white issues are rare and they're easy. It's those gray ones that become very complicated.
That's why I'm asking that.
And I will tell you, Dr. Mayer has never put pressure on me or our coordinators that we need to toughen up on, this situation or something of that nature. I think we've got a pretty open process.
as long as they know they can exercise their discretion, because sometimes it just does that little situation doesn't fit in the round hole.
That's why zero tolerance policies are problematic and have to be handled very carefully.
Right.
And we've exercised our discretion too with the early reentry
Absolutely.
process and so on, and really trying to minimize the amount of time that a student is out of school if they've made it very clear to us that they've taken their steps and appreciate go back to their base school.
And I asked that question because some things have gotten to the board that we have had to exercise discretion on. And of
Why
course,
didn't it get exercised before it got here, though?
there you go. We don't want to seem like we're not supporting the school. We want to support them, but
Because-
help us support you by exercising discretion at a lower level and not letting it get to this level if it doesn't necessarily
Because we will
have to.
exercise it when it gets here.
Right.
Zero tolerance, I've often referred to it, and I know the educrats get upset with me as zero common sense, because you just, sometimes it's just zero common sense, and you just, that's what happens when it gets to the board. We use common sense. And so, because I know these board members, and if the principals don't exercise it, it will come before us, and we will. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any public comment? There being none, board concerns. Elena?
I just need your board members to please bring your laptops in next work session so we can do updates on them. And then Mr. Cummings is going to review some updates on the graduations for the high schools.
If we have our laptops now, can we leave them today? Or not?
No, because he'll leave now as soon as we leave, so that'll be, thank you.
Attorney Green? Dr. Mayor?
Officer Career, thanks for being here today. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. A reminder to everybody that Monday is Memorial Day, so be safe with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mayor. Ms. Stacy?
Oh, I don't really have anything, but as we're walking through this situation with this virus that we've got, a little history lesson. I lived through the Hong Kong flu. I was in high school. Very serious. 100 million people died. That was as many people, more people than died in Vietnam and Korea. We've heard that about the COVID. And it was an H3N2 virus. It was very similar to COVID-19. Usually, people did not die from it until they had contracted it for 2 weeks. It took 2 weeks for it to travel. It was a very similar, highly contagious virus. And in fact, President Johnson had it. The CIA director of the United States died from it. It was very serious. And the vaccine was never really quite successful because of the fact that it did mutate, much like this one is now mutating. And when it peaked, it peaked, and we've kind of hit the peak. And some good news is, if history matters, it kind of just began to fall apart once it peaked. After the peak, in January, I guess, of 1969, February, right along there, it really hit its peak. And then Woodstock came along a few months later. And I remember my family, I had some friends that went to Woodstock, and they're hippies still to this day. And I remember in the community, I can't believe they're letting them go to Woodstock. I can't believe they're doing that, because they're going to get sick. Interesting, there were 500,000 people at Woodstock. They expected only to be like 50,000 maybe, and there were 400,000, 500,000 people there. They were so close, they were not social distancing. They were climbing over one another in New York where they couldn't hardly move, and they expected it to set the pandemic back off. Good news is nothing happened. There's been a few cases of Hong Kong flu. It still kind of hangs around. It still hits us every once in a while. But the interesting thing is that it's like this flu. 80 to 90% of the people were elderly that passed away. And in some of the states, 60% of the people that have died are in nursing homes. And so it was a very, very similar virus to this. But just for y'all, for your little history lesson, I want to read you something that came from Dr. Moore. He came out of the Harvard government, history and government of Harvard University. And just so that y'all don't remember what I'm talking about because you weren't there. I was there. And it says, some believe that COVID crisis will change us. I hope they're right. I hope we do learn early on when there's a pandemic or something that we immediately start washing our hands well, maybe distancing ourselves a bit, and that this will change us, but it probably won't. Because if the 1968 pandemic was as visible as it was, that people like me remember it, it barely makes it into the key books on the Vietnam War. They believe the Vietnam War and the people coming home spread the virus tremendously. So it's hard to see how there'll be much change that'll come about after COVID-19 when it retreats. In 50 years, when y'all are lecturing young tykes like I'm talking to you. In much the same way, the Iraq War demonstrated our ability to forget the lessons from the Vietnam War. The 1968 pandemic suggests we may eventually forget COVID-19. Now, not only does the general public forget, but unfortunately historians do too. they also often forget history. So when I'm talking about this in a different way than y'all do, I've lived a pandemic already that was just like this one, just about as severe. Actually, more people died from that one, and there's people that will say that they believe the Hong Kong Hong Kong virus or flu was probably worse, may end up being worse than COVID. But this will end. It's going to all be okay. Pandemics come and go, and they often go as quickly as they came. So just wanted to give you a little history lesson. I've been here before. That's the reason I have a little different attitude. Okay? Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Stacy. And, Ms. King?
Yeah. I wasn't going to say anything, but I think I will say a little bit. And this is my first time ever going through a pandemic, and I've been in classrooms and been around a lot of sickness and stuff. But I do have family members that are immune compromised or they're very elderly, and we lost, for example, my mother-in-law this year and my elderly father-in-law. So I do take this pandemic seriously, and I will take precautions that fit best for my family setting. So, you know, those are my two thoughts on it.
As we all did
and
50 years ago.
Correct. So, but that's the
So
difference,
history
is
is
to
repeating
protect,
itself.
is to protect my loved ones and our students. So, but other than that, I'm good, and I just want to just again express my gratitude for all our employees that are just working diligently. I know it's coming to a close and ahead, and it's the end of the year, and it's even crazier and more complicated than usual. And when we see, like on Facebook, or you see that teachers have to tell their students goodbye, you know, with their bag of belongings through a window or a wave, that's it's heartbreaking and heart-wrenching to see that for both the students and for the teachers. And so, again, to all our employees, thank you so much. And that's about all I have.
Thank you, Ms. King. Ms. Thor?
Just have a great and safe Memorial Day weekend. Hopefully you get a chance to do everything that you love to do with family members and whatever it is that makes it special for you. I'd like to acknowledge our veterans, of course, and thank them, as always, for their sacrifices for our freedom. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't appreciate where I live. And shifting gears to graduation, I do continue to get some phone calls here and there, and of course, everyone is remaining very hopeful, and some of us are confident that our infection rate in Marion County is going to continue to stay flat or decrease. And I would encourage any community member, employee that's watching, to keep an eye on what the governor is recommending. It seems like every 2 weeks on a Friday, that is when he makes the determination of what next phase to be moving into. Our employees continue to do a masterful job managing the here and now while remaining flexible and nimble for what may be available going forward. We all want this to be behind us, and we will continue to do everything we can, to honor the integrity of our school system, the hard work that everybody has put in, especially our students that are going to be graduating, and to make those graduation plans as meaningful as possible while always maintaining safety first. So while it is agonizing to have to keep waiting and hoping, that's the pattern that we are forced to be in at this time. And if it can be more open safely, then I'll certainly be advocating for that. And so please stay tuned and stay positive. Continue to help each other. That's what's going to help us get through this. When it gets down to Facebook memes and finger pointing, that doesn't really do much to solve any of the problems. So I continue to look forward to doing all I can personally to be of as much positive effect as possible, and I hope everyone else will do the same. So again, have a great and safe Memorial Day weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thor. Thank you, ladies. First, to Ms. Stacy, our prayers are with you in the passing of your mom. You only get one mom. You only get one mom. Take care of your mom. We just celebrated Mother's Day, so that has to be a little bit difficult I've been there. I understand where you are.
But God is good, she didn't pass
yes.
on Mother's Day.
Exactly. So, to be able to have your mother, that's a blessing. I do want to say to everyone that's listening, please check on people. Please check on those people that you may not see on a daily basis. These kids right now really need folk to have some conversations, to have different outlets other than social media. They need to have some, I don't know if you guys know it, we had one of our students that passed this weekend, Dunn High School, self-inflicted. So, exactly. We need to be talking to these kids. We need to be having conversation with them. And it's not just kids, there's a lot of things that are going on. We just need to look out for these folk. To our Dunn High family, we know you guys are grieving right now. We just want to let you know you're in our prayers, but please, and these kids, if you're seeing signs of things that are not right, we need to know. Let us know. Let somebody know. Tell somebody, and when folk give you that information, somebody needs to sound the alarm, because we don't want to lose kids. We don't want to lose anyone. But we definitely need to make sure that we're addressing these issues. Being confined when you're not used to being confined can play tricks on your mind. And we just need to make sure that we're paying attention and looking for those types of signs. Also, as I said earlier, we don't know what's ahead. We're not clairvoyant. I wish I could. I wish I was, because I have the correct 6 numbers and be in a different place. But we do know we have to prepare for the fall. We do know we have to prepare to continue to educate. And I already talked to Ms. Boston Ellis and Grantham and Dr. Grantham and Ms. Dobbins about getting with you guys so that you can see some projections and things like that, so that we can be in a good place. We want to be in a good place. We want to make sure that we take care of our people, and people keep jobs and not be getting pink slips. That's you guys. Some of you guys were in that situation. You experienced it, Ms. King, Ms. Thor. You guys were there when they were, I think, in 2007, 2008. Yeah,
Oh, it was
they were gone, and we lost a lot of people. And then when they did get it corrected, they were gone. They were in other counties. They had to have a job. We don't want that to happen. We don't want that to happen.
And that's my concern too, because if the federal government bailed us out, but it was already too late we had lost so
Right.
many good people.
Right.
A
So
lot of goodwill and faith, too.
yes. Yes. So we don't want that to happen again. So it's going to take us being prepared and doing the things necessary to make sure that those things don't happen. And I want to say this to our teachers, to our staff. I believe that the board members, all of the board members here, are going to make sure that you guys are taken care of. We've done that. We've been doing that. I don't think we're going to do anything to jeopardize any of you, but you got to be willing to know that there could be some adjustments, changes, and it may be uncomfortable for a minute, but I can promise you that as soon as we can make things better, it's going to get better. But just be prepared. Don't just keep an open mind about things. I keep hearing, and Dr. Mary, you may could address it a little bit more, or Ms. Boston Ellis may could come in. There were some days, because I'm getting a bunch of calls, there were some days that right after spring break, there were 4 days some makeup days that some people need to make up. And they need to understand that those makeup days were not forgiven or whatever, that they got to make up those makeup days. And that's why we've gotten that extension. So people were saying, why am I working for free? Well, technically, you're not working for free. Yeah. You were already paid those 4 days.
Hurricane days.
That week immediately after spring break. So I'm just trying to clear the record so people understand. You're not working for free. You got paid in advance. You just got paid in advance.
Right.
Am I saying that right, y'all?
That sounds good. You got paid in advance. I think that covers it
Okay,
good.
you got paid in advance, so those 4 days. Prepaid. You got prepaid, so though you're not working for free. And I don't want people to think that we're trying to get anybody to work for free. I've gotten calls from different folk that are concerned, why do I have to work 4 extra days for free? You already got paid for it.
Some of the misconception may be that the commissioner excused the educational minutes.
Right.
Yes, but
Right.
not
Not the-
contracts.
Not exactly.
Yeah.
So, we're just evening the table, that's all it is, we're just evening the table. So I don't want them to think of that we're trying to get over on them. That's not the case. And then, graduation is approaching. I've gotten a lot of phone calls about graduation.
Oh, I know.
I've gotten so many phone calls about graduation, about tickets, about can they decorate their hats and all those types of things. And I had a conversation with Dr. Mayor about that one. And we know traditionally in colleges, they do decorate their mortar boards and stuff like that. But in high school, they traditionally don't, because you're just trying to, everybody look the same. Get with your school, get with your principal, get with their area directors on that. Let them decide if they're gonna do something like that. And go ahead, Kevin, I'm sorry, because you may have the answer for me.
Well, I don't know about that. Reverend Cummings and Board, and I would just want to make you aware, we are doing tests this week at each high school stadium to look at the strength of the signal to live cast. We did yesterday at Booster, and that turned out much better than expected. But I believe that may be the bright spot. We do have some schools that geographically are located in areas not serviced well by cell signal.
Correct.
And what that basically means is some high school graduation ceremonies, we may not be able to live stream. We will be there to record them. And if we can't live stream them in real time, as soon as it concludes, one of my guys will rush back here and post it to YouTube.
Right.
But I just need you all to understand, that's something obviously beyond our control, but we are using extra equipment to make this happen.
Right.
And if the cell signal is there, remember, you're going to have hundreds of people there with their own cell phones working off the same bandwidth that we're trying to grab for high definition. So we're all competing for the same space on the highway. But just wanted to share that information with you up front. But we're testing every site so that we'll know ahead of time.
And thank you, Kevin, because he's absolutely, I can tell you, I can promise you, you will have an issue at Dunn High School.
Yeah.
Because there's, the signal there is just horrible.
We have something we're looking at for there, but
So,
Which high school?
Dunn.
Oh, yeah.
I can tell you, and maybe even Lake Ware, and maybe even Lake Ware as well.
just to let you know.
So, thank you, Mr. Christian. So, please get with your senior advisors, students, make sure that you're doing what you need to do as far as that, and getting those things taken care of. And then, board members, the schedule for graduation is out there. Elena kind of needs to know where we're going to be going. They're suggesting that we do the schools in our districts. If you can't go, let me know, because I'll go. That's not an issue. I think I did most of them last year. So if you can't go to one of us, I'm sure, can fill the gap for the other one. That's what we do anyway. And the MTC one is open to all of us. Am I saying that right?
That is correct.
MTC is,
You'll be receiving an invite for him today.
okay, so MTC is open to all of us. So please get with Elena today to pick up your regalia and all those things. And but if there's one that you can't make, or you don't feel comfortable being at, whatever it is, whatever your reason is, just let me know, and I'll definitely go. Okay. With that being said, please have a safe Memorial Day. Please have a safe Memorial Day, and let's come back and keep pressing this thing out till we get back to normal. So, there being no other concerns, the meeting is adjourned at 12:12 p.m.